I frankly think that crisis initiation is really tough. And it's very hard for me to see how the United States president can get us to war with Iran. Which leads me to conclude that if, in fact, compromise is not coming, that the traditional way of America gets to war is what would be best for U.S. interests. Some people might think that Mr. Roosevelt wanted to get us into World War II, as David mentioned. You may recall we had to wait for Pearl Harbor. Some people might think Mr. Wilson wanted to get us into World War I. You may recall he had to wait for the Lusitania episode. Some people might think that Mr. Johnson wanted to send troops to Vietnam. You may recall he had to wait for the Gulf of Tonkin episode. We didn't go to war with Spain until the until the Maine exploded. And may I point out that Mr. Lincoln did not feel he could call out the Federal Army until Fort Sumter was attacked, which is why he ordered the commander at Fort Sumter to do exactly that thing which the South Carolinians had said would cause an attack. So if, in fact, the Iranians aren't going to compromise, it would be best if somebody else started the war. One can combine other means of pressure with sanctions. I mentioned that explosion on August 17th. We could step up the pressure. I mean, look, people, Iranian submarines periodically go down. Someday one of them might not come up. Who would know why? We can do a variety of things if we wish to increase the pressure. I'm not advocating that, but I'm just suggesting that this is not a either-or proposition of, it's just sanctions has to succeed or other things. We are in the game of using covert means against the Iranians. We could get nastier at that.
Welcome to the Daily Wrap-Up, a concise show dedicated to bringing you the most relevant independent news as we see it from the last 24 hours. Sunday, December 3rd, 2023. Thank you for joining me today. Actually, an important follow-up, obviously, by the title you can tell, in regard to a very serious allegation, something that we have been discussing from the very beginning, based on some of the most obvious points to start around allegations at points when it seemed impossible anybody could know, and then following up with the lacking of evidence, and then continuing to see all the different lies that were spun that we can verifiably prove that even they've been forced to admit. And we're discussing the possibility that rapes were committed on October 7th. And as I've said from the very beginning, nobody should dismiss that's possible, whether we're talking about Hamas or Israeli military or RDF or American military or British military. In fields of war, unfortunately, disgustingly, that's a common thing. And that's something that most of these Western powers don't want you to know. But the reality being is it's something that we shouldn't dismiss as a possibility. So Hamas members that came through, of course, that's possible. The point that we're only ever trying to make here is that as an objective reporter, it's our obligation to demand evidence. Now it's being contorted at this point, and we'll get into all of this today, that asking for evidence is now somehow insensitive. And that just the stories we're being told you demand to be believed. Now, my point is in general, and I've said this going long before October 7th, somebody, let's just say somebody claims that happened. There's no reason for you to just disregard what they're saying. Even unless you're an investigator or a journalist, there's no reason or have some vested interest in one story, one side of it or another. There's no reason you should even say, I don't believe you. But when it comes to investigation, when it comes to police and criminal accountability, are we arguing that we shouldn't now demand evidence anymore because it's insensitive? Because the reality is we're getting to a point to where that is being pushed so far that it's calling for legal action, calling for accountability, calling for action in the international community, when, as we'll go through today, the evidence is lacking. It is testimony. And even one more thing in regard to, let's say, first responders. Because we'll go through it. There are people, and there's many different reasons we can go through about why it may or may not be accurate. But the point is, somebody is as we're being told through media reports, as well as through the IDF, which is all I can actually prove, is that there are first responders that told them that they said, I saw this and I believe that was rape. Now that has standing. That for me or anybody else, that should be okay. Well, that person probably knows what they're looking at. They see this stuff. They're first responders. But that is only insofar as our understanding of what we think happened. Because from that point forward, I, as an individual, would say, okay, well, that's probably what happened. But we still need to prove it, because we can't then definitively report these things without having proof. Because for two reasons. One, because as a journalist or an investigator, that's an absolute necessity. But if we want something to be done about it, which is what they're actually calling for before that middle step, go after Hamas. They did this. Well, then we absolutely, legally and just professionally, should demand evidence. And that's why this is so important to me, even though, I mean, despite the fact that it's a contentious and uncomfortable topic, which, you know us well, this is what we do, because the truth is most important. Now, we're going to go through that, and it's going to be the latter half of the show. My objective today is to try to go through the opening stuff reasonably quickly. As you know, I often fail at that. And this is going to be following up on just what's happened since the lie of the ceasefire and the onslaught. One of the titles I was going to use today that I went away from was simply that this is a war on all of Palestine, and some variation of, and now it's all obvious, or everyone seems to notice that. But this is, without question, a war, a genocide against Palestine, which in no way is meant to undermine or ignore what happened on October 7th. Both things can exist in the same conversation, that this is an absolute genocide and Israel's willingly doing that. We shouldn't dispute that anymore. We've got multiple plans that outline genocide. We've got multiple statements that explicitly state genocide. We've got all sorts of different programs that make it clear that's their objective. We've got leaked sources. We've got IDF on the record. We've got helicopter pilots saying that they shot their own people. I mean, at this point, we have to realize all of this is obvious, and we're battling people that aren't going to change their minds because they have an interest in not doing so. It's just absolutely mind-boggling. We're going to go through all of the information up to date in regard to the horrors that are happening. We're going to go into some of the lies that are continually being spread, which will lead into the latter half, which is that main point about that being one of the major allegations they're continuing to push forward in an aggressive fashion. Now, I opened today with that clip, Patrick Clausen, Washington Institute, classic clip, not old, it's an older one, discussing, how we get ourselves to war with Iran. And if you really listen to it, people always try to debate what he really meant there. It's sort of like debating that somebody tells you what temperature it is outside. It's very clear what we're being told. Now, you could try to pretend that they meant some secret wink thing about it. He was discussing exactly what it sounds like. They want to get to war with Iran. And how do we do that? Well, we could lie about it. We could take out one of their subs and use that. Like, this is what they're literally saying. And of course, the points are about the different false flags in history. Now, you could dispute that. Simply, we had to wait for an event that we could capitalize on, even though that's just as surreptitious as dishonest. But we also really understand that they committed these acts in most cases to justify the wars or allowed them to happen, knowing they would take American lives. This is just U.S. history. If you're not aware of that, it's time to catch up. But ultimately, the bigger point for me is in the context of this conversation. Obviously, Iran, in their minds, plays a huge part in this, because that's where they want you looking next, like they did in every other event. It's a main point for them. But I think it's more about the larger sense of what we get into today. And this last point to open is thinking about that clip as it applies to the IDF, intelligence apparatus in Israel, the United States government and their intelligence apparatus, and what they would be willing to do to accomplish these goals. History makes that very clear if we're honest with ourselves. But keeping that in mind, it doesn't apply to everything we're going to talk about today. Keeping in mind the idea that these people are willing to lie to you. They're willing to kill people, including their own people, to get a step that they weren't able to accomplish, or they would have been able to take, but might have been a little bit too conspicuous or too problematic. Now, obviously, what they're doing is that. I don't think that's intentional. I think that they thought we would buy this or that, or ignore this, or continue to pretend that it's all Hamas or all bad, or they're all terrorists. But everybody sees through this right now. My point, though, is not only what they did to try to get us to look away or try to rationalize genocide, but what they might do next in order to make us think what's happening here in Gaza is justified, or to make you think the next step about other countries or what they'll build this into or what they might do after will be justified, how that might be justified by what the next action could be. So keeping this in mind, false flags, the manipulation of events to convince you that what they're doing is justified. So keeping this in mind as we go through, I'm going to start with some opening points about kind of what has happened in the last 24 hours and how this is never really, more specifically, how this was always the plan. And let's not forget all of the different evidence we have about the false flag aspect, right? The New York Times report that even just came out that everyone's still kind of grasping, that they knew about this a year ago, that they have multiple IDF members at multiple locations at multiple times going back months that were saying this is happening. They're practicing right there. They were mock invading, like just ridiculous things that we shouldn't even be pretending that's not what it looks like, that they knew and did nothing, like Pearl Harbor, like any number of other events, and possibly were involved, like 9/11. These are not things that we should balk at anymore. Now, involvement doesn't mean that they were flying the plane, but it ultimately means they were involved, were aware there was very much action and lack of action being done. So on October 7th, that was the same thing to different degrees. But we have to be honest about this. Even people in Israel are very explicitly open about that. So keeping all that in mind, Sarah Abdallah reports today, Israel has killed more than 700 Palestinians in Gaza during the last 24 hours alone. We're not hearing allegations about 700 Hamas members taken out. I understand they'll tell you there's only 30,000 Hamas members, give or take, in Gaza. Just mathematically, if you look at how many areas they've bombed, it's I'm going to go ahead and say impossible to pretend that every one of these locations had confirmed Hamas locations. I mean, literally just they've bombed. I mean, I don't want to go ahead and on a limb and say that they've bombed. I mean, just somebody in the chat, tell me, would you argue that 6,000, I think it was 6,000 tons, 4,000 bombs, and I guarantee that's more. That was like a couple of days ago, a week ago. Would that amount to, no, I think I should answer my own question by thinking it out. But the bottom line is 30,000 people and the amount of bombings that we can see, it's obvious that they're not just bombing Hamas. And even more so that the bombings they're conducting are not, like Scott Ritter pointed out, areas that they know for a matter of fact are Hamas member locations, which makes it a war crime, even if they think that they're there. And then we can add the point that we just discussed in one of the last shows about the assassination factory. Again, very ahead of this story that's only still trickling through even a lot of the independent media, which was the artificial intelligence, I think it was Habsora. I think I got it right that time, which stands for the gospel. And it is not Hasbara, but Habsora, and it is a artificial intelligence program that is giving them the locations to bomb. And their own people speaking on the record with 972 magazine made it clear that which they called it a mass assassination factory. Quick summing it up, they have what are called power targets, and they're civilian. In most cases, aren't even where Hamas members are. They said on the record, sometimes we just take down buildings to take down buildings, to hurt the population, to maybe affect Hamas. Deliberately targeting civilians. We've got Amnesty backing that up, Human Rights Watch backing that up. We've got the United Nations backing that up. We've got them IDF members, both intelligence and former. I mean, it's absurd that we debate that this is happening. 700 Palestinians in 24 hours. Israel is, as she writes, Israel is exterminating the people of Gaza with the complicity of the United States, the UK, and the EU. This is genocide. And then she goes on to report after that, Israel just wiped out an entire residential block. Now, by the way, I have checked these. This is just where I saw it first. In Shakua, I looked up one earlier, probably something off from that, but the point is a place in Gaza. Early reports indicate around 300 to 1,000 dead. Average, I'm hearing, most reports are about 300, including some injured possibly, but a lot were there. The point is, typically with the bury, we don't know, but people died. A lot of people. There's not even reports about, we thought Hamas was there. They don't even do that anymore, it seems. Seems like they feel like they've gotten past the need to excuse what they're doing. Bombing all across the area, including the protected areas, including the areas where they're being told they're safe. Not the old one, not the old safe zone, but the new one too. As Saeed points out, U.S.-made bombs dropping from U.S.-made aircraft. That's what's happening right now. So there's no getting away from this. That's why I think the U.S. government, both left and right, and Biden's administration specifically, are aware they're too far in. 300 Palestinian civilians dead, half of them children. This is NATO genocide. Now, there's some graphic stuff, so be aware. If you're watching with your family, there's some graphic videos we're looking at here. Horrific scenes being released from the Jabalia massacre, not the refugee camp from before, a new discussion from the 3rd. They are bombing civilian refugee camps over and over and murdering people in overwhelming fashion. Your government knows this. The international community knows this. They're all watching it take place, and some of them are pointing it out, but nobody is calling out action. Nobody is initiating the Genocide Convention. Only the ICC seems to be looking into it, and even then, we're going to get to at the end, they don't seem to care other than with Gaza. And they're specifically because of Khan, the main person, at least what we're hearing. The bottom line is, it's one of the things I have the hardest time with this, one of the things that I continue to have the hardest time with in this conversation is not just the fact that it's obvious and grotesque and murder and genocide right in your nightly news and your TV, but it's that they go, this is okay. This is right. This is justified. Hamas did it all, and all of it's their fault. Yeah, for 50 plus days later, continuing to carpet bomb, but it's their fault. All these civilians, 70+% women and children, but it's Hamas's fault. Even though we can prove they're not using them as human shields, even though we can prove that Israel has a literal policy called the neighbor procedure where they use human shields. I've talked about this at length. Times of Gaza reports a repeat offense. The occupation unleashes internationally banned white phosphorus bombs on Jabalia refugee camp. Right, so you bomb it for the however many times and then release white phosphorus for good measure, just in case they weren't suffering enough. And let's realize that even if that was Hamas, that's still illegal. That's why they won't admit to that, despite the fact that there's been multiple admissions from international groups like 2009, where they used unlawful white phosphorus on civilians. And then also since on the 12th, since this started, white phosphorus in Gaza and Lebanon. We'll have another example of that in a minute. Xavier writes, the Israeli Air Force bombed the Holy Family School in Gaza City that belongs to the Catholic Church, which is a pretty consistent thing. The targeting of Christian locations and groups throughout the Middle East, but specifically in these areas. And that's one of the reasons why they pretend that there's really not Christian locations in Gaza, despite it being, some of the most classically Christian concepts and locations in the world. And let's not forget, by the way, both Christians and Jews for the most part, specifically the note about Jews in Gaza. It's really frustrating to me that there's so many propaganda things out there that I'd love to break down, claiming that, look, there's no Jews even allowed in Gaza. Yeah, do you know why, you bunch of ignorant people that don't do your research and don't care? Because Israel expelled them. It's easy to look up, but it's just amazing how many how much misinformation is flying around that is blatant. And by the way, you shouldn't be censored for it because you're allowed to lie. That's free speech. The point, though, is that you only get a very one-sided effort coming from the ridiculous community notes that only seem to attack things that seem either true or negative to one side. But it says they thought they were safer in church institutions and they got bombed on the first Sunday of Advent. You think that's an accident? Israeli aircraft bombed the Holy Family School, which houses a large number of displaced people in Gaza. They're literally bombing the locations they know are housing the people that are running from their bombs. Times of Gaza. Massive destruction as a result of the occupation's bombing of an entire residential square. This is the same location we were just telling you. Sujai. I'm sure I'm manipulating that, but trying my best. Look at this, guys. Just look at that. That location. Look at that. Are we really trying to pretend like this is some tactical attack on Gaza or on Hamas, despite the fact that they've admitted more than once it's about damage, destruction, not accuracy? Another graphic one, horrific images coming out of Khan Yunis. The place where they were supposed to be safe until they've initiated part 2 of this. Multiple airstrikes in the area since this morning. Children, women, disabled. Most of these places are mass locations for mass displaced people that are already trying to flee, people that are already hurt, people that are starving, they can't find water. And then all you get are these grotesque accounts out there, like the ones we mention often, who are laughing about it, acting like they're lying and they got all the food and water they need. It makes me sick. Good Shepherd Collective reports of heavy use of flares, now airstrikes and fire belts in residential areas of Khan Yunis, southern Gaza. Remember that no more than a week ago, Palestinians were being urged to flee to that location. Even remember Dershowitz said that right in the beginning. Clearly, he knew what the plan was, and Rafah as safe zones, despite the reality that they were also being targeted even from the beginning, from the very beginning. Now they're bombing this location and bombing, by the way, where they're going and on the way there, just like last time. Sugaya, thank you, Sugaya, if I'm even saying that correctly, but I'll do my best. Horror scenes of Salih Eldin Street. Now, you guys already know this. This is the street where people were fleeing, the safe route. The moment civil defense teams rescued dead bodies and injured on Salih Eldin Street during their displacement towards the city of Rafah. The scenes are from North Khan Yunis. I mean, it's graphic, guys. All these are horrific. By the way, somebody screamed at me online because I used that image of a child that was buried. It wasn't very graphic. It was just sad. Acted like I was only using propaganda to manipulate people. Just let me know what's going through people's minds today. Somebody like me who's like literally going out of their way to not show the worst of these things because there's no reason to. There's no reason to constantly, you know the accounts out there that are getting a lot of shares because they're sharing a lot of graphic things over and over. Some of the same ones I pointed out actually share the same one day to day and get a lot of shares for it because people share. I don't know why. We all know children dying. We don't need to keep seeing children dying, but maybe that might shake somebody free. So who knows? But I don't think it's necessary. I'm only mentioning that because I just was almost disgusted by somebody that would. Anyway, the point is, despite being designated as a safe route for safe passage, the road became a road of death. Not according to witnesses, according to verifiable information, and according to even corporate media that had to acknowledge that the safe zone was a cemetery full of people that were trying to flee, holding their garments, children next to them. Same thing's happening now, by the way. The new supposed safe route. Israel kicked this elderly woman out of her home twice. I've been making this point from the beginning, long before even October 7th, for the people that get displaced if they tell them they have to demolish their home and move somewhere else. Uprooted in 1948 from her hometown. Now forced out again. She says, I wish I could return home, even if there's just one wall of my home left. What she means is her real home in occupied Palestine, where she's not allowed to go back. Not the place she's now currently being removed from. This is crushing cruelty that has been our daily reality for 75 years. Now, all that being said, of course, the U.S. is going, please, please stop killing civilians. But here's more bombs because we care. Clearly. I mean, who would disagree with that, right? You care about civilians as you arm the people who don't listen to you when you ask them to stop killing civilians. That means they don't care. That means they're hoping you think they care. Remy points out, it's not simply Palestinians are dying in Gaza. It's more precisely, Palestinians are being mass executed in Gaza by the Israeli military with full blessing of the U.S. government, and the bullets are being subsidized by U.S. tax dollars. Exactly. There's really no way to dispute that other than the argument of how they're being executed. You can argue you're accidentally killing them all as you go for Hamas, but you're still a disgusting terrorist by killing these people in mass. I mean, the reality is the numbers alone make this clear. I mean, it's just, if people will say, you're wrong, Hamas did it all, and they're responsible, and blah, blah, blah. That will die down as the reality drifts back in and we go forward, just like every other conversation. Sadly enough, by that time, they'll have murdered all of them anyway. Hopefully we can stop that. The problem, though, is that it's just not up for dispute with people that are objective. All of the institutions, they'll in 30 seconds from now look back and go, let us know, because we pretend we didn't go through that time where we acted like you were just all Hamas because we were desperate. You don't kill 20,000+ civilians and 7,000 children and pretend like you're defending yourself. That's why it's unprecedented in any context. I mean, it's just, I'm really just at a loss for how people can even pretend this makes sense anymore. Doctors Without Borders conveys attacks. By the way, who they're all also starting to call them like working with Hamas, I guess. I'm not, and just so you know, just like I've said from the beginning, for those of you that watch this show and know, I'm just because we point out that this might, the one group, like let's say UN, for example, is saying something that I believe is correct. It takes a really ignorant person to go forward thinking that means I blindly trust them forever now. Maybe that's how you think about it, that if you listen to somebody now, you blindly follow them, but that's not how intelligent people think. We can acknowledge something's true without blindly believing everything else they say. We can acknowledge that what the UN is doing is on the right side of this for whatever. Doesn't mean their interest is the truth. Could be their own self-preservation, which doesn't then mean that the next thing they say is true. The point is, Doctors Without Borders, the United Nations, UNICEF, Oxfam, any of these groups, or anything we're talking about, it's about whether you can engage with it and say true or false, not that everything forever means that they're on your side. So in this case, Doctors Without Borders conveys attacks in Gaza against them. Not some accidental point about Hamas, but literal directed targeting of their cars, their locations. I mean, think about how wild this is. It's the same as targeting UN. I mean, if this was any other country anywhere in the world, Iran or their adversaries in particular, you would never stop hearing about this. It doesn't matter what they said. I mean, it wouldn't even matter if there was actually literally terrorist organizations working with UN. The US and Israel would still say that they broke the law. So my point is, you have these groups that are roundly seen as, protected entities, Doctors Without Borders, Reporters Without Borders, and they are targeting them now. And you don't hear a peep from the international community by and large and the U.S. government. It says, we call for an independent investigation to establish the facts and the responsibilities. Now, Max Blumenthal points out, same video, Israel's mass assassination machine. Don't forget, he makes a good point here about the AI, the Habsora, basically the AI system that's giving them targets. My point is, if they then the AI said that was a target, so we're not going to dispute the AI. Like, there's a level of unaccountability there. And we read the article. They're not deciding. It said it would take 10,000 of their own people to process the information. And it says that they're graded on how many targets they get. So they're being incentivized to not think about it. They're being incentivized to press the button because they told them that was the next target. And they're hitting 200 plus more targets than or whatever the number was, a lot more than they ever were able to hit in a normal period of time. Now it says it was a deliberate attack against clearly identified Doctors Without Borders cars, according to them. It follows their flagrant violation of the temporary ceasefire terms of humanitarian aid, right? They broke it multiple times. This is from their article. Oh, excuse me. This is Democracy Now! Doctors Without Borders demand permanent ceasefire. And this is from their post themselves. While sheltering in our office in northern Gaza, our colleagues witnessed Israeli tanks destroying clearly marked cars. Now, this is different, guys. This is a bombed location. This is even crazier. This is Israeli tanks seeing very clearly marked Doctors Without Borders cars. There was, I'm going to mix them up. I'm sorry. Doctors Without Borders cars. And then driving over them with their tanks. This is how they act with impunity. Think about what that says. These are IDF members that are going, we know that the world pretends this is a group that we're not supposed to, but we know we don't like them helping people that we don't want them to help, or Reporters Without Borders. We don't like them reporting what they're showing. Because why? Because we're breaking the law and we know it. So we send them a message. Get out of here. That's my interpretation, but it's documented. These own groups and international communities international organizations have continued to call this out for decades. We just have a very short memory, it seems, intentionally. Daniela Modas points out, UNICEF spokesperson says southern Gaza, the safe zone from 30 seconds ago, is facing the most intense bombardment with devastation losses among children. Devastating losses. Now, the point of this is the average person may not be thinking about this. They were pushed out of the north under a guise that they would be allowed to come back. We all know that was a lie from the very beginning. Now they're saying, move out of the way. We're bombing in the south. But you can't go back to the north or we'll shoot you. That's literally what they're telling them. What are they supposed to do? They're not letting them flee anywhere right now. Nowhere else is for them to go. So they are literally bombing fish in a barrel. And they don't care. The world doesn't care. The international community doesn't care. They're watching them get murdered in real time. War on Gaza's children continues. Hospitals are overwhelmed and have had to treat patients on the floors, like this child missing a leg. The point is, these are the people this is why they're bombing these people, because they don't want them helping the people that they want to get rid of, as I see this. Now, in regard to some other parts in the larger aspects, Lebanon has been bombing more so around the edges, around the occupied areas that Israel illegally occupies in Lebanon. Israel is, and then because of that, and because they know that Lebanon is not going to sit by and let this continue, as they said very clearly, rather specifically Hezbollah, Israel is now intensely bombing South Lebanon right now, dropping white phosphorus, as you can plainly see. There is no way to misunderstand that on multiple villages. Don't expect a peep from the so-called international community. Yeah, the rules-based international community, right? Now, to be very clear, it's specifically Hezbollah, very different than Lebanon specifically. But the point is that they are obviously continuing to violate international law on the record in plain daylight, where everybody to see. Even and you can see the reports as I just showed you. They know they do this. They've even already called them out for Lebanon. Is there any accountability for that? Anybody going to jail? Hardly. TD Geopolitics points out the Pentagon is reporting that multiple U.S. Navy vessels in the Red Sea are under attack. Now, what I said before, we keep hearing this. I'm not going to dispute for a second that Yemen, or the Houthis in particular, would do this, especially for their own purposes, because they've been under a starvation campaign that is still going on, by the way. We just don't talk about it. People are dying all the time in Yemen. Nobody cares because, freedom. The point, though, is that it wouldn't surprise me if the Houthis were to do this for their own agendas, but also because they're fighting, and they've stated they're in solidarity with Gaza. And this is where they try to pretend that it's Iran somehow secretly orchestrating, or actually Russia more than that, or whichever one suits their interest in the moment, without any evidence to make that case. But overall, though, I do have some suspicion this is actually happening. Not because I wouldn't do it or because it's not possible, but because I just don't hear anything else. There's usually more to it and more action. For me, I think my point is, I guess we should just simply ask whether or not this is just another statement to justify and paint the picture of a larger action. But equally, both are possible. Now it says, Houthis statement in 25 minutes. Update. 2 ships have attacked by drones in the Red Sea. 1 ship has been hit by at least 2 drones, according to maritime security sources. Israeli media says 2 cargo ships were damaged today by Houthi attacks, one belonging to a company associated with Israel and the other to England. Now it says the Bahamas flagged. I didn't see that. I was hoping he had a follow-up on the statement. I didn't see that. But again, like I said, it really wouldn't surprise me if the Houthis would do that. It would make perfect sense to me. Not that it would be necessarily justified, assuming the ship was a civilian ship. If it was a military ship, then it would be technically part of the same thing, because they're all being occupied and attacked. And it's just, we don't talk about this. The illegal occupation of Syria, the illegal occupation of Iraq, the illegal occupation of Yemen. All these countries have the right to armed rebellion. But every time they do anything, it's all terrorism. And maybe sometimes it is. Maybe they break the law. The point is that an actual engagement, which is usually what's happening, is not terrorism. That is the what's the word? What's the analogy for that? The bully crying foul, right? They're the ones picking on you. And the moment you do something back, oh my God, they hurt me. They're not allowed to hit back. That's not fair. Well, here's what Hamas said. Here's what Hamas said on their statement in regard to what's been happening going forward since the fake ceasefire. He says, we demand all the world's forces to end the occupation of our lands and our Al-Quds. We are ready to pay the price for freedom, and we will not accept anything less than our independence, which, by the way, the vast majority of Palestinians support, which is not the same as saying they support Hamas. They just support the idea that they would rather literally sit there and be killed by Israel for their freedom, for their rights to make and that's not my opinion. That's what they're stating. They would rather die with dignity in their homes than flee and be displaced yet again. Many of them. The point is they go on to say, we had information that the aggression would return to Gaza after the civilian prisoner exchange operation. There will be no prisoner exchange as long as the aggression continues on Gaza. Now, Israel is already using that, already acting like Hamas is the one that refuses to turn more people over. That's a lie, because it's already been admitted from the very beginning, per Hamas and even per Israeli sources, that they have had on the table from the first week a full exchange if they were willing to do this. If they were willing to give up all of their people, they would do the same. Netanyahu was forced to admit that. So now that they're pulling it back, that's not the same as saying it was there from the beginning. If Netanyahu actually wanted his own people back, he would have done it. They used that as an excuse. And in fact, they did. Anyway, the main point, as I'm trying to go through this in a timely fashion, is that they pulled this back now because it's obvious. Well, I mean, my opinion would be that it's obvious Israel is not engaging in this honestly. But either way, even if they pulled back now, stating because of their aggression, that's not the same as saying that it's their fault we can't get these people back now, because they were on the table for a month. It says, we are in a battle of liberation and the occupier must leave our land. We have proposed the handover of the elderly over 60 years in exchange for the release of our prisoners over 60. Again, which Israel is ignoring, not even pretending is happening. They won't, and the point is, I bet you they won't even say that's on the table until they're forced to engage with it, because of some larger platform makes that known. But it is there. Efforts are ongoing, and our borders in Qatar are exerting efforts to curb the Israeli aggression in Gaza. One more point to this, by the way. If you're an Israeli and you've got family members that are over 60, that should outrage you, because that is currently on the table and they are not caring about it. The ruling class in the Zionist entity has an interest in continuing the aggression because once it stops, this is what Hamas is saying, and this is the truth, its role will end and Netanyahu will go to prison. Now, if you don't believe that, that's what Israelis are saying. That's what the media in Israel is saying. By the way, that's what is the reality. Netanyahu was this close to going to prison before this started. A lot of people believe that's why it happened. Either way, he's always used Gaza in the war on Gaza to get himself out of a tight spot. That's been reported in Haaretz more than once. And he's got 4 different indictments. He was trying to rush in judicial reforms, and they called him out for it. They said, you're doing that for your own benefit. Even then, they argued that the entire process of what's been happening up to the 7th was just to avoid him going to jail. Now they're saying you propped them up and that blew up in your face. So it's amazing that part can't be included in the conversation. Even if you pretend everything they're saying about Hamas is true, well, then it's Netanyahu's fault. He allowed them to be that, then failed to protect his people from that. To blame the Palestinians for that is absurd based on the facts that even their people are calling out. But see, the point is, most of this game is being aimed at the Western American audience. Think about why that is. It says the resistance led by Hamas is steadfast in Gaza, and we are certain that the Palestinian people will expel the occupation. Every Israeli crime against our people hastens the end of the occupation. I salute our brothers in Lebanon, Iraq, and Yemen, and we call on all Arab and Islamic countries to fight the occupation. As Arab state, receiving the leader of the Zionist entity at this time is difficult for us, illogical, and we are against normalization with the occupation. So that's their statement. 2 more points before we get into the kind of main bulk of today on the hostages. So they're clearly talking about, I mean, at the very least, what they're stating, if you take it at face value, and you shouldn't, you should question all of this, is that it's their fault. Same thing Israel would do in reverse, right? Their aggression, and then obviously their illegal occupation, which is not up for debate. Even if you want to go back in history and pretend, which I disagree with even that side of it, but that there's some larger historical point. The reality is obviously that this was Palestine, as you can easily prove, despite all the Hezbollah propaganda, and that this was taken after the Balfour Declaration. These are provable points. So it's really silly to pretend that you can just, go back another 1,000 years and say, we were there. The point is that at that time, before that, there was not an illegal occupation. There was migration, people shifted, things changed. And at that time, Palestinians, Jews, Muslims, they all lived in peace and harmony for the most part. That's easily documented even by Jews and even by Palestinian Muslims. Avi Shalom, very highly regarded historians will tell you that. And then the Balfour Declaration was by the UK Britain was written, and they took this and then carried out a lot of terrorism per the Lehigh Party, Irgun Party, the Zionism is on the record to initiate that, bombing Jews to drive them into the area per Avi Shalom and other historians. It's interesting. Anyway, I was going to go off on a tangent, but no, the point going forward, the resistance led by Hamas is steadfast in Gaza. Oh, I just finished that. So the point in general is that they're trying to blame it on them, trying to bring this back to it's not really even blame. I mean, the reality is what they're doing is their fault in regard to what they're doing in Gaza. They're bombing people. You can't blame somebody else for your actions. You can claim that you're doing that because of Hamas, but to somehow act like the consequences of what you're literally doing for 50 days past what you're pointing at is somebody else's responsibility. I mean, my God, that's stupid in any sense. Like, imagine your child coming up and telling you something like that. No, it's my brother's fault forever, because it's really dumb. So going back to the hostage point, It says the family, and I already reported this to you, but I want you to see it from Times of Israel. The family of one of the freed prisoners reportedly rejects Netanyahu's request to meet. You know why? Because they don't trust this person. Whether or not they agree with what's happening in Gaza, they do not trust Netanyahu. It's one of the most obvious things in the world. And on the actual points of the prisoners, I wanted you to see this one point. There's been so many examples, and really the main point for this whole topic is that it's every single one of these people, every single one of them that has come out has said some variation of we were treated kindly. They gave us food. Not to say that they were happy they were taken. They were still traumatized. They're still being kidnapped. The point, and by the way, with all the civilians, those are all still crimes. No question. But they're saying that we were treated kindly and we got food and they kept us together. We were allowed to pray. Like that does not happen in Palestine. In Israeli prisons for Palestinians. I'll give you the examples in a minute. And then that challenges everything they're saying. So we all we get is IDF members saying this is what happened. Here's what I was told by somebody. This aunt saying this is what my son went through, which I'm not disputing that. But I just have not heard that child say that. I haven't heard anything other than these people saying we were treated kindly. And then even then, you'd have to argue that it's weird that every one of them would say that they were treated with kindness, and then the one person saying something different, which wouldn't be these false. Maybe they did do that. Maybe there's a reason. Not to justify, but maybe my point is that they're treating them kindly so that they challenges Israel's narrative. I mean, who knows? But we have to engage with the facts that we can see. So here we have yet another example. And unfortunately, or we're just in a really sad story, this is the child that Israel already claimed was dead. They already said that they told her father she was killed and said they found her body. Again, I argue it's because they never expected any of these people to come back because her Hannibal directive. And as we've even been told by a colonel in their military, what happened on the 7th was called a mass Hannibal. That's what he called it. They shot them as they left because they did not want them to blow up in their face. Then they continued to carpet bomb this area. I think they thought they would get them all. That's my opinion. This is another example of one of those people, and this is the girl they said was dead, but now she got returned. And here is why I think they don't want them to come back, because they don't say what they are telling us that they are going through. So first, Majid points out Emily Hand, 9 years old, after she was released by Hamas. It says, when she eats, she offers me and everyone first. So she offers me and I tell her I don't want. She goes, no, eat some more for me. It says, I asked them, Hamas, they suggested eating together and offering food to those more hungry. She nodded, yes. This is his interpretation. It says, Natalie, I'll play the clip. Natalie talking about her 9-year-old sister's behavior after she was taken hostage and released by Hamas. She's saying Emily has learned to become more and more compassionate and caring. No, this isn't Hamas propaganda. This was released by Israeli Channel 12 News. Now this just clips right from where he talks about that one point about the sharing food. Here is what Israel's account shared. Specifically this, and this is from Israel. It says, Usak, be quiet. 9-year-old Emily, who was taken hostage by Hamas terrorists, are now home in Israel with the family. It says, we cannot even imagine the horror she endured. Well, she doesn't seem to say that at all. But right now, we all do is focus on her recovery. Listen to Tom discuss the trauma of their family is grappling with. Well, see, this is my point about the way that the context that they add to this. That's not what they're saying. That's not what she's saying. Let me play the full clip that Israel shared.
We've been told not to pull. I want to pull. I want to, what did you do? I want to interrogate her, debrief her, if you will. But no, you have to just do little tugs on a thread. And hopefully she'll, in time, come out with what she wants to come out with.
סתם, כאילו בחדר, אז פתאום היא עושה...
So right there, it's just interesting. I do agree in a sense that with trauma, you don't want to just blunt, but it's interesting that they're telling us, like, I think the point in my mind is that's like, we don't want to hear more from what her story was, because we would like to relay what we tell people she went through. That's what she's already telling you, the horror she endured. Well, have you talked to her yet? Sure, you could argue that's the case, but everything else contradicts that. Now she says, we were sitting in the room and she says, uskut.
Uskut. לאנשים כאילו שמעצבנים אותה.
To people that annoyed her. She wanted to tell them to be quiet.
בא להגיד להם רגע שקט. uskut. ביסקרויט.
And it says biscuit.
לא הבנתי מה זה
I
ביסקרויט.
didn't understand. What is biscuit?
חושבת על ביסקוויט.
I thought she was saying biscuit.
מה הקשר?
Why?
שאלתי אותה, מה זה אומר?
So I asked her what that meant.
אמרה לי, להיות
She told me to be quiet.
בשקט, be quiet. כנראה שככה הם אמרו את
I
זה.
guess that's how they said it.
Uskut, be quiet.
כן.
Okay, so that's the part that wasn't in the other video. But so that's what Israel focused on. How horrifying it must have been to be told to be quiet. Now, I'm not trying to diminish the fact that people were kidnapped, and that was a traumatizing point. But think about how interesting it is that we're being told, raped, murdered, destruction, mutilation, that every single one of them right now are being tortured. I mean, this has been the onslaught the whole time, which is certainly possible. But yet then every single one of them that comes out says something different. And then instead of going, oh, wait a minute, I guess that doesn't mean every one of them is being raped, and highlighting things that, like, look at this image of her being forced to hold his gun. Remember that one? And they're both smiling, holding up peace. Like, it seems like the most desperate thing in the world. Why would you need to make a benign thing into something terrifying if you have all the evidence in the world of terrifying things? I'm just trying to be objective. It's very weird. Now, here's what it went on to say. So Israel only focused on that first part, being told to be quiet, as if that's the most terrifying thing in the world.
תמיד שהיא אוכלת, אז היא
And when
מציעה
she
לי קודם
eats, she offers
ולכולם
me and
קודם.
everyone first.
שזה לא היה ככה לפני.
It says it wasn't like that before. She says no.
אז היא מציעה קודם, וגם
So
אם
she
אני אומרת
offers
לה
me,
שאני
even if
לא
I
רוצה
tell her I don't
לנסות.
want
נו,
to, she
תאכלי.
goes, eat some for me.
נו, בשבילי. וזה לא היה ככה.
It wasn't like that.
שאלתי אותה אם הם היו
I asked her if
מציעים,
they would
כאילו,
suggest, they being Hamas, if they ate together and offer food to those who are more hungry,
שהם היו אוכלים ביחד ומציעים כזה למי שיותר רעב, או
or share with everyone. And she nodded, yes.
מתחשבים בכולם, אז היא עשתה לי כן עם הראש.
I mean, what am I missing here? Like, I get it. You're like, whether or not they were helping you. First of all, the point is that that's not what happens in prisons for Palestinians, as we can easily prove, per literally every human rights organization that has continued to call their prison tactics out for decades. And whatever the ones being released and what they've told you, and the evidence we have of their actual condition. And over here, we've got the example of the Hamas terrorists telling her to make sure everyone's fed, make sure everyone who's hungry eats first. For the people we're being told that they wanted to murder and mutilate and attack. It just doesn't make sense. Now, yes, this could be a lie. This could be some kind of, maybe only these people got nice treatment. Everyone else was tortured. I'm not being completely biased here. We have to be objective. The evidence does not line up with what they're saying. I find it's infuriating that we're being forced to kind of act like, bottom line, that what they originally said does not wildly contrast with what we're seeing now as they try to turn benign things as telling people to be quiet into the same atrocities that they're claiming happened in the first place. And it says, this is nothing compared to what she's been through. Imagine saying, be quiet in Arabic. Now, quickly in this last part, remember that after all the continued bombing and what's been going on and the displacement up to the south, this has all been part of a larger plan. Guardian News even reports Israeli grid map, which we already told you was happening, makes life in Gaza, quote, macabre game of battleship. These are human lives we're talking about. This is not about only Hamas. You literally just turn this into, again, with the AI mass, I mean, everything on the table admits, AI assassination factory, that they are taking out Palestinians, at the very least, that they could care less whether they kill civilians. But this whole point makes it obvious this is about a systematic, deliberate attempt to move people out of the area. Now, Daniel Seidman points out in Ben Gavir's East Jerusalem, people are getting these notices. Different from, we're about to bomb this building, get out of here in 10 seconds. This is not about that. This is, we're taking this area over. So you need to move out of the building because we're going to demolish the building. Not bomb it for Hamas, but demolish it so we can build settlements. This is what is happening. Mark my words. Things are too calm. It says Israeli authorities this morning delivered a warning notice to the residents in a 5-story building in a Sawana, East Jerusalem, that they must evacuate immediately prior to demolition. It says with approximately 20,000 outstanding demolition orders, one might ask, why was this building targeted? If I had a suspicious mind, I might conclude it's related to one of the residents. It's saying head of the higher Islamic committee. But it says, in Ben Gvir's Jerusalem, the eruption of violence and the widening of the war is not a risk, but an objective. Ben Gvir's demolition derby continues. This is this morning in let's see exactly where that is. Subir. Let's see. Let's see if it's in Gaza. Yeah, in Palestine. Was incorporated into the Ottoman Empire. Maybe not. Well, we'll come back and look. Maybe you know in the chat. Let me know. Yeah, no, it says south. Actually, it says it's in East Jerusalem. So right now, this one because it would have made a lot more important if it was already. But as far as I can tell, I'm not seeing any provable evidence that they're already starting to build settlements or something else for members of Israel in Gaza. It's happened in the Gaza envelope already, and this has been going on for decades. My point, though, is that this now is being placed on people's doors saying, in East Jerusalem, get out. We must demolish these buildings while this is going on. So if you think, like, imagine the story that we can't worry about the evidence around the rapes, which we'll get to in a second, because we're in the middle of a war. But over here, we can maintain all of our settlement projects and demolish buildings, which would definitely take away manpower and focus while we're in this war. But we can't investigate rape and do rape kits. We can't do forensics to make sure because, we're focused over here. That's actually their allegation. But here, they are continuing their demolition, which, by the way, are illegal in every sense of the word anywhere in the world. But they're doing it anyway because they know nobody cares. In B'Tselem reports, the Israeli human rights group, yesterday, armed soldiers and a settler, so IDF and a settler, threatened a Palestinian family that was hiking near their home, Taha. A soldier hit one of the residents with his weapon, cocked it, and threatened to kill him. Quote, whoever crosses this line gets a bullet in their head. Look at the child right there. Look at the tiny child. This is what they've lived through for 75 years. And the settlers, don't forget, Israel is now giving, despite the fact that pretty much everyone in the world now is acknowledging that we've had these roaming gangs of settlers, literally raping, pillaging, stealing, displacing, shooting, killing. That's per international groups. Even the United Nations has called this out. People have been saying this is a horrifying problem. And guess what Israel did? Gave them official capacity. Pass legislation to literally make them official. So now they have official capacity to roam around and keep the peace, is what they said. This is keeping the peace as far as Israel's concerned. People that are by their home and being told they have to leave because they want their territory. That's what's happening. That's what this is. And as this says today in our dystopia, a drone arrives in the porch of a Palestinian family in the West Bank village with a recorded message. If you think about doing anything, we will reach you and kill you. Now, that seems to be a mild truncation of it, but you can listen to the translation right here. And it says that we will kill, don't do anything, or we'll come after you, we will kill you. As it says, I miss only seeing this in movies. Oh, now in regard to the settlements, this isn't super important. I just thought this was weird. I wanted to use this to remind me to point out just the secret plans. But this Adam Johnson guy, I'm not familiar with his work, posted pro-Netanyahu paper in Israel reporting a plan is circulating in Congress to support the resettlement of Gazans using aid as leverage, which because you watch this platform. You knew that a week ago. This is consistent with reports Netanyahu seeking to thin out Gaza's population. You knew that as well a few days ago because you watched this platform. There's a term for this, and it's not a hunt for Hamas. So you'd think we would be exactly on the same page, right? And he tweets this, any comment, White House, about this report? I simply responded, so he saw I want people that are following this to know, here's the actual plan, right? Here's the link with the information. You can read it for yourself. I guess some people don't like that you post your content under their tweets. I mean, people do it to us all the time. I think it's good. Share the information, get the thread going. Maybe we'll see what's going on. Now, he blocked me. Maybe it was a mistake. I don't know. I thought that was pretty strange. But I think the point overall was, I don't know if he was ruffled by the fact that it's clear that I talked about this before him. I don't know. But the point, both of these you can see from the 29th of November. October 7th narrative further collapses and the U.S. secret plan to forcibly displace all Palestinians. There's the image. The links to the actual report are in the show notes, not here's what somebody else reported that's happening, but the actual source material. So maybe that person's not real and they want you to not see the source material. I don't know. But I just don't know why somebody would block you for agreeing with them, for saying the same thing. In fact, giving you the source material, not some mainstream article saying they saw the source material. But here's the other one. Netanyahu draws up a new plan to thin out the population in Gaza to a minimum. That was December 1st, 2 days ago. So yes, this is real. Yes, they're going to do this. Yes, they have these plans. It's all easy to see. Now, that doesn't have to mean that that was the plan before October 7th. I do think there's an element of that. I mean, I guarantee is an element of that. I just don't know whether that was the driving force behind it. In this case, we need to know that this is now what's happening. The U.S. government and your governments around the world are blinding themselves to this because, or I don't know. I could give you my opinions, but here's the tweet that he was sharing. Senior U.S. lawmakers review plan linking Gaza refugee. It's right here. Settlements to U.S. aid, meaning that the point is other countries that already get U.S. aid. They're arguing. We already reported this in this show. They're arguing, look, if you don't do this, we're going to revoke your aid, potentially billions of it. But if you do it, we'll give you more aid. That's how it works. And Sharmeen Narwani points out, totally unrelated, guys. Promoted property. A report goes out. Israel real estate forecast 2024. Thousands of new properties. Like, let's just pretend they're all going to jam them into the place they already have, right? No. They're going, hooray, we've got more Gaza territory. Get ready. More settlements are coming your way. That's what this is. That is obscene. It's all right in front of you. Now, we're almost past an hour. I was hoping to get there sooner, but one more section before we finish with the point about the rape allegations and the misinformation flying around, and that is the idea that this is genocide. And you know this, but it's important to understand that this is, like, even if everything they said happened, everything, what's happening in Gaza is still unjustified. And that's the most obvious thing in the world. So here is Hussam Zamlit from the PLO and representative of the Palestinian Authority, rather, as he writes, the head of the Palestinian mission to the UK, former head of the PLO, strategic advisor to the president of Palestine, which is the PA. Israel has categorized, and I've said this many times, all Palestinians in Gaza into one of three groups. Actually, let me just, I do this sometimes, and I forget that he basically reads it exactly that, but let me just play the video first.
All Palestinians, it has categorized all Palestinians into one of three groups. One of three groups. Either terrorists or terrorist sympathizers or human shields. All are targets. Senior officials from the very top have deployed genocidal language, discourse. They have promised a second Nakba. They have called for nuclear extermination, annihilation. They have invoked biblical justifications for the wholesale slaughter of every man, woman, and child. I'm talking about the top. This is Prime Minister Netanyahu, by the way. They have called us human animals. They have publicly argued that all Palestinians in Gaza be forced into the Egyptian Sinai, the desert. They have done more. They have acted upon these prescriptions by action, not just words.
Now, that's a really important point, right? Not just the fact that it's obviously what they said they're going to do, what they plan to do, what they're literally doing, but the fact that you can easily prove by their language that they've created a dynamic where there is no innocent person, which, by the way, they've also said. The Israeli president said there is nobody innocent. People in the military have said they're literally all animals and nobody. There's probably 15 different examples of people in positions of power claiming that there is nobody innocent in Gaza. Yet then they tell you we're only going after Hamas. Well, that's why that works, because they're all Hamas, but there's nobody in the corporate media that's going to force them to make that clear. But if they put them in three categories, either terrorist, terrorist sympathizers, or human shields, it literally creates the justification for them, not in actual legal standing, because it's still against the law. Human shields does not give you the right to murder thousands of civilians. It doesn't. Or even one for that matter. There's a dynamic in play here. They're not meeting the requirements per everybody in the position to speak on this. But when they do that for them, it creates the justification for all of them to be bombed, no matter what. Now, Jason Bassler makes this very clear. The Palestinians speak up. We are living through modern genocide. UN scholars, experts, they speak up and they say Palestinians are currently living through a genocide. Israeli politicians, openly, we want to commit genocide. We are committing genocide. Not the word genocide, but the point is their statements are explicit. Turn it into a parking lot, destroy them all, drive them into the sea over and over. But Western legacy media? Well, it's a complicated situation. We shouldn't jump to conclusions. Exactly. So perfectly highlights the jarring inconsistency and outright lying that is on full display right now. Only those invested in not seeing it are acting like it's not obvious. Now this from 2018, just to make this as clear as possible, because it's amazing how little memory people have, or rather, I don't think people had paid attention like they are today in regard to Israel's actions, even on the world stage. The Associated Press reports in 2018, Israel's Supreme Court rejects human rights groups' request to declare that it's unlawful for soldiers to shoot at unarmed civilians. In case you didn't hear that, Israel's Supreme Court, after human rights groups requested that they declare that it's unlawful to shoot unarmed civilians, their Supreme Court said no. Exactly. Now, that's as simple as it gets. This is like the United States government trying to pass a piece of legislation that says stop arming terrorists, like a paragraph long. And almost every single one of them voted no. There wasn't some secret passage. There was some rider in there that made, nope, they just literally voted no, we want to keep arming terrorists. It's just that obvious. And as I said, if we need any more proof that this is exactly what the Zionist government are doing. Freddie Pontone points out Luis Moreno Ocampo, former chief prosecutor at the International Criminal Court, explains why this is genocide.
Genocide is a convention, and it's a convention that is requiring the states, parties, to prevent genocide. That's why genocide is so important, because it's the only crime of these crimes that they have this obligation, not just for not to commit the crimes. There are 153 states, parties of the Genocide Convention, including US and Russia and almost all of the countries, who are committed to prevent and punish genocide. That's why genocide is so important.
How about ethnic cleansing?
Ethnic cleansing is a wording used to avoid to define something as genocide. Why? Because if you are a state, if you are US, and you say it's a genocide, you have the duty to prevent. If you say it's ethnic cleansing, nothing happened, it's okay. Israel's reaction is also include many crimes. It's complicated to identify the word crimes because each bombing needs to be evaluated. But there is something very clear. The siege of Gaza itself, that is extermination or persecution as a crime against humanity, and it's a form of genocide.
Right. Do you hear that properly? The point is that what they've already done is by definition genocide and collective punishment, war crimes. The point about the bombing is interesting. It's the same thing that they're trying to use as an excuse to justify why they don't call it genocide, or we won't be able to figure out until they stop. Probably why they've bombed, so excessively with so many bombs. So it ends up being like, well, it's just not even possible to be able to gauge it. Well, why don't I just start with one of the bombings and see how that works out? I bet you that doesn't happen.
Article 6C or 2C in the Genocide Convention define that you don't need to kill people to commit genocide. The rules say inflicting conditions to destroy the group, that itself is a genocide.
So you hear that correctly. He's saying you don't have to kill people. Now that's one of the things people keep trying to say. Well, once over 1 million, then you can start calling. Like how glib, like how disgusting. Like you just like, well, let's not over 1 million, unless it's over 1 million, it's not genocide. The obvious reality is that there's different points to it. Intent is obvious, but what he's saying is creating and intentionally trying to create the conditions that could lead to it is in and of itself a genocide, says the expert.
So creating the siege itself is a genocide. And that is very clear.
The siege being the same thing they do on Yemen, the same thing they're doing to many of these locations. Venezuela, that means the U.S. government is doing the same thing. Shocking, I know.
Want the siege is very clear. And the intentions to destroy the people, many officers from the Israel government are expressing genocidal intentions. That's why it's easy to say, and the reasonable basis to believe, Israel is committing a genocide in Gaza, just on the siege. Then each bombing, each of the killings should be properly investigated. But come on, we have already cleared the siege itself is a genocide.
Very obvious. Now, Middle East Monitor points out, ex-Israeli pilot says on the record, our army is a terrorist organization run by war criminals. That was 2021. And of course, you could be wrong. You could be lying. Same stuff all the time, right? But my point is, this is a pretty common thing you're hearing people looking back. Now, here is an interesting example of that kind of sentiment. Yanni Leviathan says on the record, which they've already limited visibility because it violates our violent speech, but we sure as hell left it all there, which, by the way, I'm not calling for it to be removed, but it's an interesting dynamic where they censor people for much smaller things, but let this remain by just kind of going, which, by the way, gives it more view, as we all know. Very interesting. But hear me again. No way am I saying it should be removed. In fact, these people need to be seen, so we know exactly how disgusting they are. To those who reply to me with pictures of the damage and destruction in Gaza, as if this is supposed to be something that moves me, you should know how much I really, truly, in my heart, don't care. In fact, this is the saying I could care less was made for. By the way, this is a guy, prominent, U.S. born, U.S. raised, Israeli blooded Zionist Jew. That's what he says right there. Prominent being is, that claims he has license to MTV and ESPN, blah, blah, blah. It says, when I see dead Gazans, I don't see dead Gazans. I see the dead Israelis who came before them. Right. So you're a disgusting person. Like as if you're incapable of seeing that people matter everywhere. This is the same thing I was saying in the beginning. We can obviously say civilians being hurt in Israel are obviously matter important. I care about this side too. You don't. Thank you for making that clear. When I see suffering Gazans, he says, I don't see suffering Gazans. I see the suffering Israelis being kept in dark dungeons underground. Why? Because you see all of them as the same thing. Because you're disgusting. That's the point. Remember how they keep telling you, no, Palestinians are free. The innocent ones, we're trying to get out of the way because we're going after Hamas. And they'll go, no, we're pinpoint targeting Hamas. I'm willing to bet you my life if you put it to this guy in a different conversation that are they bombing civilians? He'll say, no, they're going after Hamas. Meanwhile, here he is going, they're all disgusting. They're all terrible. I see them all as the same. If you see all of them and what they're doing to Israelis, you're pretending that child born yesterday is keeping people in dungeons, assuming that they're keeping them in dark dungeons. Clearly, that's not what's happening, at least by who we've talked to that's come back so far. It says, you see Hamas's attack on October 7th was so successful that it blinded all of us to anything related to Gaza, Gazans, or the troubles of either one. No, the exact opposite. And he knows that. It's exposed the reality that nobody was paying attention to before. Anyway, the bottom line is he goes on to just be disgusted. None of this matters. It's all Hamas's fault. We don't care about Palestinians because the secret point is that they're all the same thing. That's what he's saying. Now he goes on to follow up and says, this is a good example of what I'm talking about. This guy wants me to feel sorry for 8,000 dead Gazans, but all I can think about is how lucky they were to die in an instant instead of being tortured for hours on end. Again, because you're blindly going along with a narrative that has yet to be proven. And I'm going to get into it right now. Well, actually, I think these ones are actually relevant. Hold on. It says, instead of being gang raped for hours. That's exactly what we're going to get into next. The reality that there is zero evidence, there is no proof to make that allegation. And really, even regarding evidence, the only thing we have is third-hand reports coming from officials saying they spoke to somebody who hid and saw that. And then everything else is about the aftermath, seeing bad things and going, assuming we know who did them. Having a knife stuck in your, internal organs, right? There's all the stuff coming from, that's how the atrocity propaganda works. That's so bad that I just don't care about those people anymore. Why is it that person's fault over there? You're the ones trying to pretend it's only about the Hamas element. Clearly, you don't see it that way. This person's saying, what about the 8,000 children? So are you suggesting the children were raping people? I mean, even his own narrative doesn't line up. But he goes, not sure what I love more. All the liberals telling me they agree with me, which, by the way, is not happening. There's a very clear effort to this to make it seem like the left or, one side of the paradigm is all about like they're all Nazis or they're all not. It's the same with COVID. This has transcended the illusions of party lines. God. Says, but in case you think this extends to all Arabs, it most certainly does not. How do you possibly make that argument? Or maybe just all Palestinians, right? That's his way of trying to sidestep that he's obviously saying that if you don't care about any of them, they're all doing this to everybody there. They're drowning. These Zionists are drowning because they're walking this razor's edge to try to pretend like they're not murdering people in genocide, but at the same time, continuing the propaganda to make you be okay that they're doing that. Think about trying to maintain that. Now, Max Blumenthal points out there's an Israeli Telegram account, which there's plenty of them, by the way, with over 110,000 followers where they just simply post images, videos of close-up, killed, wounded Palestinians, especially children, and them and their family crying as they celebrate and cheer and laugh. And that doesn't mean that this person thinks the same way, but based on what he just wrote, it's pretty clear that he has the same thoughts.
Israeli society is whipped up into a genocidal bloodlust. If you look at there's an Israeli Telegram account called Dead Terrorists. It has 110,000 followers, and all it is pictures of dead Palestinians, and people follow it so they can celebrate seeing video of their families crying. It has close-up images of their wounds. It's the most sick thing I've ever seen.
And the point is that we're talking about all Palestinians under a guise of killed terrorists. Don't forget that even Israeli IDF was early on. We caught this in the reports about people. They were telling you that the terrorists that they had killed, and they were citing the number of people killed in Gaza. They quietly put that away because it became very transparent. But that is the point. It's obvious. And just in general, we've been showing you this. There are people singing, "This was my home with no electricity or gas was my home." And I'm basically making fun of Palestinians and losing their homes, losing their possessions and their family members. Because how funny is that, right? Suffering of innocent people. Now, this is not what all Israelis think. It's not even what all Jews think, right? The point is, it's what they want you to think is the reality. They're divide and conquer in every way. But these people doing it are disgusting. These are the worst of the worst. People that are pretending like these people suffering is something fun to laugh about. Oh, it's funny how they don't care about the blackface as long as it's being done against the Arabs. But it's everywhere, guys. It's just nonstop. There's all over the internet. Here's a guy here's a IDF member posting a video of him in a destroyed house, pretending like he lives there, using their things, laughing about the destruction. Oh, too bad you don't live here anymore. That's what this is. How disgusting. Now, let's start with the propaganda. And this is one that's been circulating that I think it's important to start with. Dan Cohen points out the Jerusalem Post, run by a U.S.-born settler, an illegal settler, and Israeli military propagandist, has quietly deleted its article, falsely claiming that a Palestinian baby, whose name was Muhammad Hani al-Zahar, was murdered by Israel, is a doll. I know you all saw this. The more their propaganda fails, the lower they go. They were literally, people were Jerusalem Post, Al Jazeera, I actually have it right here. Or wait, further down. I'll come back to it. Pretty sure I had that up. Oh, wait, no, that one? I'll come back to it. I have the actual post where they admit that it was false, by the way. But so the point is, Jerusalem Post blurred, Al Jazeera Post blurred doll claims to be dead Palestinian baby. Robert just put up an excellent article about this. Just so it's very clear. This was a real child. You have his name. I just can't even fathom the kind of people that would knowingly do this with a child. There's a lot of people that are just too stupid to know that they were wrong, or just went along with it because they think Israel's on the right side of things. So anything pro-Israel is suddenly something you want to share. But this is one of the worst things I've seen in this. As Dan Cohen points out, after the Israeli propaganda machines claimed that a dead Palestinian baby was a doll and that failed, now Zionists, people like Eli David are doubling down on this and claiming that hundreds of babies murdered by Israel are all silicone dolls imported by Hamas. Just when you thought they had reached rock bottom, they go even lower. And they've got a video of fake baby dolls, like very lifelike looking things like the stuff they use in movies, right? Think about the argument after everything we've seen to say that all of it is fake. Now, look, as always, question everything. Ask yourself, could it all be fake? And then if you're an intelligent person, you'll realize there's an endless amount of provable information that makes it obvious that's not true. But ask it. And if you think I'm wrong, look into it. Here are the kind of people we're talking about. One of these constant propagandists. Either this was a doll, this doll was very close to her heart, or they're just another scene from Bollywood. Their false propaganda is embarrassing, right? The people that are getting caught lying constantly are trying to reshift the narrative, just like everything else they're doing. I didn't want, the point is, you guys can look at this is provable now. It's sad. I don't like showing a dead child, but I'll show you the link on the main image when we get to it in a second. Even somebody like this, he deleted this, by the way, but Professor Norman Fenton. If there are as many dead Palestinian babies as Hamas claims, and note the Western media believe all Hamas claims unquestioningly, do they? Where are you looking, man? I mean, this is the same thing they're trying to pretend like Facebook and everybody only allows pro-Palestinian. That's ridiculous. They're being censored constantly, even on Twitter, by the way. As even now he's going back and forth, feeling like Twitter is censoring him. It's funny, 30 seconds ago, Elon was definitely on our side. You're calling him anti-Semitic. You're ridiculous. And now he's getting censored. So 3, 2, 1. Twitter is anti-Semitic, coming from the same people. But goes on to say, then why do they have to resort to using dolls as evidence? So somebody like this, an intelligent person, why would you blindly think it's a doll based on an image, a video, or somebody else saying that? Here's the actual, there it is, the post right here. Jerusalem Post. Al Jazeera posts blurred doll. Claims it to be a dead Palestinian baby. Just unreal. Now, this is a fact check, but if you don't need this to be able to prove this, I'll get into more information in a second. Videos of a dead Palestinian baby, viral, claiming it's of a plastic doll. They found the viral video showing the dead baby 5 months old. His name is Mohammed Hani al-Zahar, who was killed in an Israeli airstrike on Gaza. Here is Getty Images. Israeli attacks resume at Gaza after humanitarian pause. It says, dead body of a 5-month-old Palestinian baby named Mohammed Hani al-Zahar was brought to Al-Aqsa Martyrs Hospital by his mother and grandfather. Those are 2 people in the videos shown holding them. And they were claiming they were 2 different ones, by the way. I think Israeli airstrikes at the end of the humanitarian pause. I think that's generally it. There's a whole bunch more images here. This is probably going to make the rest of these things crash. It was happening earlier. Same platform that's been lying to you from the very beginning, as they all have. Visgrad24, Al Jazeera post a photo, same thing. Blurred baby. Oh, no link or anything, right? Just stating this because Jerusalem Post said. Great journalism, guys. And then they delete it because they know that they're wrong and they don't follow up and don't say, oops, we made a mistake. It's gone. They delete it. No follow-up. That's what's happening everywhere. And they don't balk at it. They go right to the next lie today. As he says, his name was Mohammed Hani al-Zahar, and he was 5 months old. You are evil. Even still, it's a doll. People just continuing. Here's the Jerusalem Post. Over the weekend, we shared an article based on faulty sourcing. The article in question did not meet our editorial standards and was thus removed. We take this matter seriously and will be handling it internally in order to prevent similar incidents from reoccurring. We regret this incident and remain committed to upholding the highest journalistic standards at all times. Interesting. I haven't read this. What the context says. Jerusalem Post published an article. Okay, yeah. So they're just giving you, they're right. The tweet here doesn't give you the context of what they're saying. They're just simply saying they posted of a doll, which has been debunked and ID'd as Mohammed Hani al-Zahar, who was killed by an Israeli airstrike. Censored Man makes it let to be known that everyone in this collage made fun of a dead baby. Make sure you recognize who we're talking about here. And Wokeness, Avi Yemeni from Rebel News, Ollie London, Etienne Fischenberg, Radio Genoa, Visgrad, or whatever, have you pronounced that? Tommy Robinson, of course, jumping right back in now. And Mr. Dr. Eli David, who's also deleted this, by the way. without any comment. Disgusting people. And Elon Musk says X is the only platform you can trust for honest information. All the others are bought and paid for. Yeah, how's Yakarina working out? Well, it says, if true, Dr. Anastasia, who's completely changed her tune since seeing the reality, I think, based on how it dealt with her. If true, community notes would be there when accounts are claiming a dead baby is a plastic doll. Millions of views, no community notes. This dead child has a family. Now, the point is, you can go look at any of those posts that are even still up. People underneath it tagging community notes going, this is wrong. Here's the proof. Here's everything. Nothing. And by the way, that keeps happening. Things will be standing provable information as false. No comment. No, not whatsoever. And I'm not saying this should be censored. As disgusting as this is, they have the right to free speech. My point is that you have the right to call them disgusting. And Noura Arakat points out, as if it was not disturbing enough to find out premature babies were rotting in a hospital where occupation forces from Israel forced everyone to evacuate at gunpoint, made them leave them there per the doctors that had to leave. Not one media outlet asked Israel's reps about it. This was public information. This was shared by major outlets. Guess what? Not a single of these major outlets dared to ask Israeli people about it. He didn't ask them about the most barbaric killings or use barbarism to describe it, right? So instead, we lie about babies. Why do you think that's happening? Because they want you to ignore the fact that one of the most egregiously obvious points has happened. On the record, the doctor said we were forced to leave. We were forced to leave incubator babies, but we hope that the Israel forces will take care of them. And then during the supposed ceasefire, journalists entered and found dead, rotting babies in their beds. And they didn't even dare to ask anybody about it. Now, here's Robert's article. Pro-Israel media lie again, claim dead Palestinian baby was a doll. You can read it for yourself. And Mr. Eli David just doesn't stop, as he says, hi, UNRWA, United Nations, Palestinian Refugee Agency. Your employees left those rockets behind. Oh, weird. A still shot image of what I guess might be rockets or not in an area with stuff on top of it. Oh, who showed us? Oh, that's right. IDF spokesperson. How'd that work out so far? Certainly could be. My point is, Eli doesn't care. You got a screenshot of a screenshot, and it works because it's what I like. Ridiculous. And this is what we're really getting into. Haaretz definitively debunks iconic horror stories from October 7th. 40 beheaded babies, baby burned in the oven, pregnant woman's stomach being opened, her fetus removed. My God. Hey, that's the fourth time my computer's crashed today. Lucky enough, I've got it set up to where it shouldn't matter. I hope. We'll see if we have everything lined up here. Actually, I bet we don't. Yep. Well, bear with me. I'm going to get through this no matter what. I'll stay here for 45 hours if I have to get this out, the information out, because clearly something doesn't want this out. Dang it, man. So now I have to refresh this stuff, so bear with me. Those that are just listening, everything just crashed. So let me get this open really quickly. I lost some information, I'm sure. That's how it works. We'll at least get this one refreshed so we can keep going. I need to get the highlighting back. There we go. I'll get the next one too, just so we get ahead. All right. Well, where were we? Apologies, guys. This is what they want. If that's what happened. I never assume. But, it's It's hard not to feel that way when this stuff seems very specific. And weirdly enough, always seems focused around certain things when this is happening. Okay. Yeah, here we are. Make sure I'm all lined up here. Everything's working. All right, looks like we're still live. Okay. As I suppress my frustration. So, 40 beheaded babies, baby burned in oven, pregnant women, stomach opened or fetus removed. That's what I was trying to do right there. Let me just try and do this, do something different just in case it happens again. I wanted to show you the guy who was claiming that. There it is. Remember this guy? This is what he's saying. I have just seen the video of terrorists cutting open the belly of Israeli pregnant women while she was still alive, forcibly kept awake. Well, Lewis, which is probably why you've now turned off your comments, because you're lying. I think we can all prove that now. And I said this the same thing. He has still not posted the video he claimed he was going to post a week ago on this October7th.org, which is just a recycling of the same information. So remember this guy. He's one of somebody else continuing to lie to you for somebody's direction because he didn't see these things. Even Haaretz has now called these things out. Children bound together and burned, pregnant hostages given birth, all shown to be lies. And this is per Haaretz investigation. Now, what they're saying in here, by the way, as we get into the final part, is based on testimony and other information. They're saying they argue that there were rapes and other things committed. But again, you read this, it's about people's testimony, not evidence we can prove, which is my main point today. But just to go through this, the Hamas massacre led to the spread of horror stories, not all of which happened in reality. You're not hearing this anywhere else. In regard to corporate media, Israeli media, the truth is hard enough. Here's what it says. Most of the time, these are real testimonies supported by evidence, but in the Israeli public and in the world, there have been stories and descriptions that are not true, and which, among other things, provide ammunition to the deniers of the massacre. Now, here's the thing. Is anybody denying the massacre? Like, this is the weird framing. Everybody knows that things happened. At least I shouldn't say that. I mean, there's plenty of people that are arguing maybe that it was all a false flag and a wag the dog scenario. That happens every time. I very much don't think that's the case. I think we can prove that's not the case. My point, though, is that anybody on that side of the conversation is not claiming that it didn't happen. They're simply questioning whether it was some of it was committed by the IDF or all of it was committed by the IDF or some of the things were used to cover up things. I mean, these are valid questions based on the evidence we can prove. Now, just quickly in this, there was just, I lost the stuff, like I said, so I'm not going to try to re-highlight it. I'm just going to go through. So this one was one we already told you. This one we already broke down. This is one of the people from the, saying he spoke with an IDF officer. He's saying he interviewed Lieutenant Colonel Yaron Buskila. Remember that name because he lied. He told there were babies hanging on clotheslines, which then was proven to be false. And he walked it back and said, I thought this guy was telling the truth. It turned out he was a bad source. I walked the story back. This guy. So why don't we consider that? You think he just a one-off where he guys woke up that day and said, I'm going to go lie about babies on clotheslines. No, this is a coordinated effort. The atrocity propaganda, so they pretend that you don't have to care about the genocide of children in Gaza. But they go on to tell you a lot of the stories we talked about. For instance, where was it? Yeah, so it's saying this man testified about another horror scene. He told several occasions about the body of a pregnant woman he found in the kibbutz Be'eri, where her stomach was split open and the fetus attached to it, right? He also repeated the testimony in a conversation with Haaretz. He even stated that he saw in a certain house that it was full of blood. When we turned around, we saw that her stomach was open. Members of the kibbutz, where was it, saying, but among Be'eri's dead were no children, 6 or 7 years or close. Elderly families lived in the area. I'm trying to catch it really quickly. Her and her husband did not tell, it's saying the point is the people that were actually there did not say anything about a pregnant woman or the family with a small child staying at their home. The video circulated on social media that allegedly describes the murder of that pregnant woman, but was turned out to be fake. And this is, I think, the one that was about the Mexican cartel thing. That's what this is. And it has been proven to be fake in the context of not from Israel. The kibbutz itself is also disowned the description. So the actual area, the kibbutz ba'arei, said that didn't happen, saying that the story of the pregnant woman reported by him and Zach being the group, this will be very relevant in a second, Zaka, or this group, they've initiated to investigate all of this. So right there, you have an example of an official at the lead of that group who's just been caught repeatedly lying about one of these atrocities. So when we go into the next story about these same people telling you about how rape happened, maybe question that. Even the police do not know the case at all, and the source familiar with the examination of the bodies told Haaretz, because the case was not familiar to him, or told the base also told Haaretz that the case wasn't familiar. He didn't know that happened. Zaka also response in the volunteers. Oh, their response, is that the volunteers are not pathologists or experts. They have no professional tools to identify, blah, blah, blah. Oh, so the fact that he repeatedly told the story of an explicit, disgusting pregnant woman cut open with and that was just him misinterpreting what he saw. Who in the world would buy that? Nobody accidentally thinks they saw that story. It says, regarding the testimony about the pregnant woman, that he explained that due to the difficult conditions of the bodies, the volunteers may have misinterpreted what they saw. Wow. Nobody buys that. Nobody buys that. So you accidentally think you saw a woman with her stomach cut open and a baby pulled out of the... I mean, come on, guys. Do you know the person that also said they saw that and saw that they kept the woman awake? He's saying he saw... I have just seen the video of a Palestinian terrorist cutting open the belly of an Israeli pregnant woman while she was alive, forcibly kept awake to not fade away. This guy's lying. There's no way around that. Then we also have these saying an official at the scene rescue union said that the source of the mistake was a volunteer who thought they saw such a case. Right? This is of the story circulating a few weeks ago. The president of this organization told about a baby who was put in a baking oven, burned to death. Yeah, we keep hearing that too. Turns out that was fake. Oh, it looks like they accidentally thought they saw a baby in an oven. Whoops, our bad. You get the point? This is Haaretz, guys. Why do you think they want to take down Haaretz? There's a reason for that. Israel Minister of Communication begins the procedure to shut down Haaretz for being anti-patriotic or, pro-truth. Depends on where you stand, And guess what? Not even new. 2010, they were trying to shut it down then. And this is important. Here's, as I wrote, Journalism for Dummies. Ben Shapiro writes, UNICEF, like all of the UN agencies operating in Gaza, is a tool of Hamas. They're just going full Zionist now, right? As that tweet, the meme I made a while ago, you never go full Zionist. The point is, I'm not going to say UN's on anybody's side. I don't trust these entities. But to just be like broad stroke, just UN is Hamas, that's really dumb. And what he's saying, by the way, is, I've already played the video. He's saying this is a war on children. It's disgusting. UN remains one of the worst institutions on the planet. I agree with that. The point is to make it all Hamas, which means you just made this man a literal target by the Israeli military, Ben. So you have to accept his death when they bomb where he is, because you're pretending we all know he's Hamas. I said, journalism for dummies. Any group saying anything inconvenient to your narrative are all tools of Hamas. No evidence needed. Anyone exposing lies surrounding your narrative is anti-Semitic, whether or not they're saying something racist. They mean it on the inside. #journalism. And as if to make my point, and with interestingly coordinated efforts, I'm telling you guys, these people are putting stuff out at the same time on the same topics because it's coming from somewhere. This clown of a human being swings in with an even more broad stroke allegation. UNRWA is Hamas. Thank you for making this so easy to expose, Eli. See? And for the podcast, this is a Scooby-Doo meme where he takes the mask off and it's Hamas underneath the UNRWA thing. And I just simply made this too today. I'm sure there's one out there, but I made it really quickly. Everyone I don't like is Hamas. A children's guide to online political discussion. Now, two last points before we get into the rape discussion specifically. IDF troops eliminated 500 to 800 plus exposed shafts to Hamas underground tunnels located near or inside kindergarten schools, playgrounds, and mosques. Oh, well, let's look at the evidence. Well, you don't get any. You just get an image of it looks like a door, which could be anything, including just a basement. Like, so we're seeing this and they go, that's what you were supposed to think it is. And then we cut away. Oh, okay. So we don't get to see inside? Okay, cool. And then we see a big bunch of dirt and a hole in the ground. Yep, that's it. That's it. 500 of those, apparently. 500, out of the 800 that we've exposed in schools specifically. I'm not saying that's not true. I'm just saying it's getting really stupid how often they're just floating all sorts of things, which 30 seconds later, their next allegation seems to undermine or contradict. Sort of like the Al Shifa Hospital went in like 14 different directions. The truck, and then it was under the truck, or was the car, or was it a tunnel, or it turned out to be on the other sid of the building, or wait a minute, it was ridiculous. They were catching them, bringing boxes in, then the boxes were removed. BBC caught them with extra guns. It was a cluster F. And they're just going forward. Look, tunnels everywhere. The point is, trust us. That's what this is. Now, let's finish with this discussion. See where we are real quick. Make sure we're still live. Hen Mazig, one of these massive propagandists, he says, according to this article, the Times article, times.co.co, Hamas treated little girls as objects, dehumanized them with sexual violence and acts of pedophilia and necrophilia, then murder or kidnap them. Necrophilia is one of the things that keeps getting floated around, but just so you understand, there is literally nothing. There's no reports about that. There's no firsthand evidence about that. There's no videos about that. I guess we'll just pretend that's not, like, they'll just float whatever, make it as atrocity propaganda as possible. Even though 40 beheaded baby, I mean, all the stories they're talking about, mind you, all of these have been shown to be false now. We already knew that. 40 beheaded babies, baby in an oven, pregnant women cut open, children bound together and burned, pregnant hostage giving birth, all of those they just broke down on the Haaretz article, fake news. So, why not just throw in necrophilia? Why not? Now, the point is little girls. Well, what are we talking? So how do you know that at all? The only evidence we have, and we'll go through it, coming from the people reporting saying they saw it secretly in a bush, are of women. Now, we know that there were children that were taken, but you're not claiming it's about that. You're saying it was on the day on October 7th. Now, other than that, we've got evidence of people who were killed. No evidence of who actually killed them. But you're just going to come out and say they just raped a bunch of little girls. I don't know. See, this just gets more and more unverifiable. Now the remaining survivors testify and are called liars. Well, that's not what's happening. I'll show you exactly what's happening as we read through the actual evidence. Instead of believing girls, far too many would side with the rapist men of Hamas. Now it's just all girls. This is just desperation, guys. It's desperation. Let's read the article itself. Actually, first, I forgot. Let's go through the one from October, I think this was the 9th, 2 days after this. Oh, excuse me, November 9th. I was thinking of the October 8th one where they said they propped up Hamas. We'll get to that same Times of Israel in a second. About a month later. And this is why this is so important to reiterate. It says, amid war and urgent need to ID bodies, evidence of Hamas's October 7th rape slips away. Times of Israel investigates how a mass casualty event in a war zone. Interestingly, it's a war zone. That's an interesting statement, by the way. They're not claiming it was a war zone because of after October 7th. They're saying a mass casualty event that took place in a war zone, which is the truth. But they don't make that argument. They claim it's a fully functional, autonomous area that they choose to run that way. It's a war zone. It always has been, and we all know that. But it's saying making forensic determination impossible. That's all you really need. But we're going to go through extensively here. The point is, if you don't have forensic evidence, it can't be tried in a court of law, which means from an investigative perspective or a journalistic perspective, you cannot claim that you know this happened. We'll make this very clear. The sexual abuse committed by Hamas, claims Times of Israel, includes acts of gang rape, genital mutilation, and necrophilia. Same thing. Even though you'll notice that there's not a single data point that I've seen that backs that up in regard to necrophilia, or the others for that matter, about the actual, whether these were committed by Hamas. But in the wake of the unprecedentedly large mass casualty event, physical evidence of sexual assault was not collected from corpses by Israel's overtaxed morgue facilities amid their ongoing scramble to identify people killed. many of whose bodies were mutilated and burned. So they did not, in any sense, collect forensic evidence. So the bottom line is forever, you cannot have legal accountability without proving this. Now, that doesn't mean that if there's people that are alive that come forward, that there might be a way to find this out. But that's also the point. From the very beginning, they acted like, no, we don't want to. And I understand not wanting to put people through that again. But that's why the police always are forced to actually find, because there's a limited amount of time to be able to actually get evidence to actually hold them accountable. Now, we're well past that point. So even the people that come forward and make these allegations, which I hate to say it, but based on how we can already prove, there's been numerous people that have come out and claimed they saw things that we know didn't happen, like the one we just showed you, or we'll show you an image in a minute. I'll make the point again about one of the images that we've proven that was an old image, that one of these Israeli witnesses stood up and said he saw that in the field, even though we can matter of fact prove that that was from 2022. So people have lied. I don't know why they would do that of their own accord. So as this goes forward, if we get more people popping up and saying, that's right, that happened to me too, we should be skeptical. It shouldn't even be contentious, guys. You don't just blindly take people at face value when it comes to these kind of serious things. That's just the way it is. We have to prove these things. But in the wake of it, and on that note, by the way, as well, let's not pretend that's not, I don't think that's what this is here, but in other contexts, that's why it's always important to prove it, because there are cases where people lie about this stuff for many different reasons. And it's not trying to be insensitive. It's just trying to be unemotional and objective. But in the wake of the unprecedentedly large event, it's saying they did not collect any evidence in regard to forensic. More than a month after Hamas rampaged through the border communities near the Gaza Strip, excuse me, and a massive outdoor music festival, Israel is still identifying the dead through disaster victims identification protocols, largely because of their Hellfire missiles that burn these bodies. That's the only thing that caused that. The decision, made under a war footing and a pressing need to identify the dead, to not use time-consuming crime scene investigation protocols to document rape cases has, however, fueled international skepticism over Hamas's sexual abuse of victims while it held control over parts of southern Israel on October 7th. Well, obviously, because that becomes, this is what we told you happened. So what you're really saying is we're mad that you're not blindly believing us without evidence. That's very telling, isn't it? But interesting enough, remember, the point here is that on October 7th and the 8th and the 9th and the whole first week, what were we hearing? Rape, babies beheaded, mutilation. That came right away. Okay, so my point is, if they were already claiming there were rapes, they would have tried to prove that. To argue that they were more focused on the war means that they either didn't care or they didn't want to have to prove that. There is significant evidence of systemic sexual abuse. And that what they're talking about are what statements of people that claim they saw things, which some of them have already been shown, including one example I'll get to be false, or IDF testimony, and really just a combination of these things. And what we're now using as proof and evidence is the recycled S testimony going into new platforms, right? So this one, the Times, the Guardian, it's all the same repetition of the same points, but they keep pointing at the new articles as more evidence. But it's saying, but morgue officials have not designated individual cases as rape because of a lack of court-compliant physical proof. It's very clear. So as an investigator or a journalist, you should go, well, we have not proven that. I don't know why that's contentious. It's very obvious. But it goes on to say this seemingly official decision not to provide clear evidence of rape to international media has fed persistent criticism. Right, obviously. Like, think about what they're saying right there. Why don't you just believe us? Their decision to not show evidence they claim they have, which is what was happening at this point in time, says nor have forensic services released formal reports. Now, I don't believe that's even ever happened, because now we're at a point where they know they never took forensic evidence, which, by the way, is being lied about in the newest article. I'll show you that next. And I'll show you why that's verifiable. But the seemingly official decision to not provide evidence has fed criticism. Well, obviously, mostly from abroad, and many media outlets are now framing October 7th rapes as a claim rather than fully substantiated fact. Well, you literally just explained that it's not a fully substantiated fact, that it is testimony without provable evidence. Now, you as the person giving testimony, you may be sure about that because maybe it happened to you. From somebody out here looking, and especially when we're hearing the IDF tell us what they said, it's not just irresponsible, it's doing a disservice to the position to pretend that's a fact. It says on November 5th, an Arab Israeli lawmaker said that a compilation of new attack footage, which by the way is the screening that we keep talking about. Make sure I'm not forgetting. I think I have things lined up here I was going to point at. Oh, that was the image we're going to talk about right there. So I do have these lined up. Here, let me do this real quick, seeing as how these all have to reload because they refreshed everything. The whole thing collapsed on me. Good times, right? So here's what I was referencing. We have to wait. If I don't stay on the page, it won't reload. So what we're going to get to as soon as this reloads is the image that I was referencing. Because that's actually, I forgot that I had lined up so we can go through the article. Because what we're going to talk about again really quickly is the Owen Jones point. Come on, I want to get through this quick. Where he saw the screening, the official screening, and it did not show what they keep claiming it did. Even though there are some people who said, I saw the screening and it showed everything. He spoke out. He said, I just got done. I didn't see any of these things. And I spoke to a British reporter and he didn't see any of those things. I spoke to an American reporter. He didn't see any of those things. So he's like, I'm not calling anybody liars, but that's pretty interesting. It is very interesting. I would just keep going forward. My point is if I go to the next tab, this won't load. So we just have to wait. Let me do this.
Is a mere 100-odd years. It was a movement of Jews who were estranged from the Torah, who detested the Torah and tried to transform this Judaism into Erzatz Judaism, a new Judaism, which is pure nationalism, material concept of having an army, Olympic team, and to be a nation proud amongst other nations, totally removing in its essence the concept of godliness.
Talking about Zionism. Okay. So, on November 5th, first, before we get to that, let me read this first. November 5th, an Israeli Arab lawmaker said that in a compilation of raw attack footage, that's the screening, which the member of parliament, member of the Knesset, declined to view when it was screened for Knesset members, did not show evidence of women being raped. Her party leader then swiftly asked for her resignation. Of course, because you can't deny the narrative, right? Well, first of all, as we talked about, this is the image. Israel was caught, rather the website that they have promoted, and which the images and data and videos are all coming from the same entity. So you can't pretend like this is some separate concept. This was the image they're using to claim of rape, which was used and cited. People said they saw that happen. Then they removed the image. And this I had to find on the Wayback Machine because even Twitter tried to delete it again, was from 2022. March 2022. Since Twitter deleted the evidence, claiming it violated the terms of service, yet allows some of the most horrific images I've ever seen, here is the archived version, which the link is right there. That's what they keep using as proof. This is actually this is what happened. Here's the article we talk about that in. Oh, actually, I remember what I did now. Sorry, I'm going to read the next article and we'll get into some of the other points. But it says, why Israel's sexual assault forensic process is at a seeming standstill. So we're talking about, and I wanted to mention this image too. This is one of the images they put out in this article, which they're not pointing at anymore. Quite frankly, I bet you it's removed from the other database. But it says a woman's body found on October 7th with a partially burned head, unclothed from the waist down. Look at the image. Max Blumenthal broke that down on his article about October 7th. The image shows a body that is stiff with rigor mortis in an obvious position of somebody sitting in a car seat with arm up and everything. And so the point is, this was what was later proven. This was a body pulled out of one of the cars and with clothes removed after they died. Probably why they're trying to, I mean, there's all these allegations. The point is, this is ultimately a scene that was set after the fact, after people had left, you understand, because this is where they fled from. So they killed them in the cars as they were fleeing per the Hannibal directive. That's the timing verification. And then this person was pulled out of the car and set on the ground after they were killed by the helicopter. It's obvious. So going forward, it says it's at a standstill in their forensic process. So, well, let me wait to make this point. The Times of Israel investigated is centered on an evidence collected from the bodies of those slaughtered on October 7th. An additional editorial decision was made not to pursue leads of survivors of sexual abuse. Okay, so right now, it's the opposite. So they were saying that the evidence centers on what was collected from the bodies, which was nothing, by the way, in regard to the forensic evidence, which we'll prove next, and it already said in the beginning. But their decision from the Times of Israel was, we're not going to follow the leads of what the IDF tells us are sexual abuse survivors. Today, as we're going to do next, it's the reverse. They're now going, we want to hear from them. We want to, now that the evidence is so far past the point that we can't have any forensic evidence. Seems like a choice. Physical evidence for rape or sexual abuse can be collected from the deceased in a manner that will be admissible in court by either a forensic pathologist or a police crime scene investigations unit. Of the two, only a forensic pathologist or another medical doctor with special certification in sexual assault can make a formal recommendation of what the findings suggest. Now, and this, by the way, is November 9th. After a month after the massacre, the window for collecting physical evidence of rape that can stand up in court is closed. That's a choice. And a forensic official who spoke on the condition of anonymity said this. Under good conditions, now why would he speak on the condition of anonymity? Under good conditions, authorities would have had about a week to collect evidence from bodies if they were promptly found and professionally handled, which is what they're saying happened. The same day, handled by the right people. So we're to believe there was a week time frame. When, by the way, remember, day one and first week, they could not stop screaming about the atrocities they were seeing. So you're telling me that they did not choose, they made a conscious choice to not get evidence? And now after the week has passed, or now that a month has passed, they're now looking back and saying, well, we're focused on war. So explain for me why a forensic location with bodies in the morgue, forensic people who are not out there fighting the war, why they were stopped from taking forensic evidence, or why they did, and that what they found is not being allowed to be told. Either way, the argument that they were just not focused on that makes no sense. What else do forensic people do in that sense? Because you realize what they're talking about is identification, the burial. That has nothing to do with the forensics. Their job was to find out what happened. They didn't do that. After a week, I guarantee if somebody could get to one of these people, they would have a story to tell. It says Michael Levin Elad, head of the National Forensic Investigative Division of the Israeli Police, spoke with the Times of Israel on the 31st of October and said that the base's, quote, prime mission is to identify victims. We were not concerned with how they died or what happened. Think about that. So all you're doing is trying to find out who they are. Blood samples, if you can get it, fingerprints, and so on. You have a week and nobody was trying to verify what happened? And literally, we did not care. We were not concerned with what happened. While they're screaming rape and allegations of everything, we didn't care what happened. Does that ring true to anybody? Of the 1,400 people presumed killed on October 7th, it says about 310 were soldiers and 840 were civilians, which, by the way, we know that's not true. So just showing you right out of the gate, they're lies. The argument, I think, was about half, give or take. IDF, police, and so on. Hold on, it has to load. Did we lose it? That might be it. I thought I had a lot more highlight, but I guess not. So let's keep going forward. So this article, this is the new one. This is from yesterday. This is the one everyone's pointing at now, right? So my point is, they keep doing this. So you get the first article that basically admits we never took forensic evidence. The time has passed. And realize that's about people that died. Whatever they're claiming about people that claim that this happened to them and are still alive, we're not getting any real-time evidence about that. No testimony other than what we're being told they said. So what we're going to see is the arguments about the earlier discussions. All of this pertains to what happened on the 7th. Nobody coming back is claiming anything happened from being held in Gaza. It says the first Hamas fighters raped her, then they shot her in the head. Right, so that means somebody else is claiming they saw that. After an hour, he peeked out. It says, I saw this beautiful woman with the face of an angel and 8 or 10 of the fighters raping her, basically. Screaming. This is what he says she said. Stop it. Already I'm going to die anyway from what you're doing. Just kill me. I got to be honest. It sounds like a very hard thing to believe somebody would say, but who knows? When they finished, they were laughing and the last one shot her in the head. Seems very similar to the other stories we heard. The horror did not end there. Hiding in the bushes, we saw 2 more Hamas fighters. They had caught a young woman near a car and she was fighting back. Sounds like a one we might have seen in the images, not allowing them to strip her. They threw her to the ground and one of the terrorists took a shovel and beheaded her and her head rolled along the ground. What did we just talk about? No evidence of any of that. That was coming from Haaretz. But again, we also have this. Owen Jones, I was just mentioning. He saw the screening, which is supposed to be their definitive evidence about everything they claimed happened. And as he says, and you can listen to it himself, no proof of beheading babies, by the way, which have now been debunked even by Haaretz. No proof of Hamas killing children at all. No proof of rape. No proof of beheading humans alive. Right there. Which, by the way, was backed up by other journalists that he contacted to confirm that he didn't miss something. Just so we're clear on that. So here we are, again, with a real-time contradiction of somebody who is claiming they looked at what Israel said would prove this and turned around and said that wasn't there. And here, now we have somebody who's claiming this man's name is Sadan, a shift manager in a foundry, apparently, which, at this point, we should be wondering if these people are even real. I mean, I'm just trying to be very objective and honest about this. That's my opinion. This all just froze on me. Damn it. Well, it says, again, they threw her to the ground right here. And they took a shovel and beheaded her. So alive. So either he's lying or all those journalists who are being told that proves all these claims didn't see it. Yoni Sidon's account is one of several witness accounts of rape. Well, I've only heard 2 technically. One of them was arguing that they saw this woman exactly described, like literally verbatim described, even though that didn't happen in 2023. So that's very alarming. It seems like we know people are lying about certain things. Now, why would that be happening? This person heard from festival survivors, all of whom she says are deeply traumatized. We'll get into that too. 8 weeks after the attack in which 1,200 were killed, 240 taken hostage, there's mounting evidence of widespread rape on October 7th. Well, not really. There's not mounting evidence. There's the lack of evidence from the beginning. And then I guess the new development of the IDF claiming people are speaking out and were being relayed through them. They have collected thousands of statements, photographs, and video clips, which he says, quote, as a Jewish mother, the mind and soul cannot bear, including girls whose pelvises were broken, that they had been raped so much. So that's one of the first things we're going to break down. So first of all, statements. Okay, so what they're talking about are IDF saying this is what happened. Netanyahu saying this is what happened. Or people, the first responders saying this is what I saw. Photographs are all the things we've already seen. It's all the static evidence that's not going to change from October 7th. It's all out there. Or the video clips, same stuff. There's nothing new today that wasn't already out 2 weeks ago. Or at very least, it wasn't put in the screening that they've already seen, that we've already now heard is not there. So it's this weird push forward, like we're going to, like the evidence is developing day by day. How does that make sense? So first, I want to make the point, as I've made before. If any of what they're saying is true, why does that not then immediately fall back in the lap of the Israeli government? It does if you're Israel. But for the Western audiences being told that's not the truth and they're all fighting against Hamas because you're being lied to, why can't we see it? Here, wrote this on the day after what they said happened. 4 years, Netanyahu propped up Hamas. Now it's blowing up in their faces. Here's the next one. Netanyahu's recklessness has brought war upon Israel. Same point. How Benjamin Netanyahu empowered Hamas and broke Israel. That's October 16th this year. This one, you've already seen. This is from Haaretz. This is from this after October 7th. Anyone who wants to thwart the establishment of a Palestinian state has to support bolstering Hamas and transferring money to Hamas. He said this in a meeting with his own Likud party in 2019, but now it's public. This is part of our strategy to isolate the Palestinians in Gaza from the Palestinians in the West Bank. Okay, so if they raped a bunch of people that they broke pelvises, that's Netanyahu's fault. Why you would then blame that on the Palestinians when he's the one that's used them, propped them up, given them money for the explicit purpose of keeping them radicalized, so it keeps them divided, so you could blame that on what Palestine. That's all open information. Again, I give Dave Smith a lot of credit for bringing this into the conscious conversation of pretty much in the mainstream. The point is, why can't the average person acknowledge that? Now, on the point about the pelvic issue, I think this is very relevant. People have made this point in the beginning. Now, I wanted to make sure I prove this. Apparently, for a pelvis to be broken, it's very hard. Quite frankly, I would argue impossible for a human being in any sense to make that happen without something, a weapon, a blunt object, or something else. So first of all, from this study from ncbi.nih.gov, pelvic stress fractures are very rare. 1.6 to 7.1 of all stress fractures. Just first of all, just very rare. Secondarily, this is under pelvic fractures in general from Houston.com or Houston. Yeah, it is Houston. The forces required to fracture the pelvis of a person with normal bone structure are nothing short of massive. So we're right back in the commotio cordis versus, they're just people just making things up to make. I try to tie that back to the, I forget the terms. The allegations during COVID-19 about Damar Hamlin. The point here is it's, I would argue, impossible for someone to rape somebody and break their pelvis or multiple people. It's not about the continuation. It's about the pounds of pressure applied. Extreme situations such as motor vehicle accidents or falls from heights are what caused this. The point being, the amount of pressure that a person of their own strength cannot apply. So let's be clear. The allegation that they were raped so much they broke their pelvis is false. Unless something else was used, but that's not what's being claimed. Because what we're hearing is that they watched it happen. One of the people did it, and that's what we're being told. The first indications it goes on came on the day itself when Hamas live streamed some of its horrors it was perpetrating. Again, this doesn't add up to me. Apparently there were videos, which I still think it doesn't make much sense. But how is it possible that Israel immediately had their live stream versions? Doesn't that seem like that doesn't make sense? On the first day when Hamas live streamed. So nobody is actually claiming they live stream on some platform. That's nowhere. People still made the argument they live stream rapes. No, they didn't. First of all, I'm doubting this even happened in regard to the lack of evidence, but ultimately that they would live stream all of this. These were videos that were picked up and used after the fact. So how did Israel get all of Hamas's live stream videos? There's plenty of possibilities there that these people are partially working with Israel or that that's not what actually happened. I don't know. But the point is nobody's explained that to me. But it says footage showed several women stripped of their clothing. One video showed a young woman with bloodstains on the crotch of her underwear, right? So these are the same things we keep recycling. The same video of the woman getting out of the truck with blood on her pants. It's the same thing. Yeah, I said the same thing. Yeah, that looks like it probably rape, but we don't know. Women stripped of their clothing? Well, yeah, we know what they're talking about. That's not the real, or rather old. They tried to use that against Russia as well. It says dang it. It froze on me. I got to stop moving. Welcome to the world of technocracy, guys. This is what happens when you're telling the truth from an objective, nonpartisan place. I mean, I don't really always believe that it's manipulation like that, but I always question it. I always wonder. Dang it. Come on. Does anybody else deal with this? I'm sure they do. It just seems unbelievable to me. Let me try one more thing here. I'll have to turn it back on in a second. There it goes. Okay. Survivors arriving at hospitals were not asked about sexual abuse or given rape kits for evidence. So we already made that clear, right? So that's the reality from the very beginning. And then a week went by. So there is not viable evidence at this point, even with people that were alive. Their testimonies matter, of course. But the point is, there's no verifiable evidence that could be used in a court of law to actually have accountability. So we're left with, guess what? Israel's government says. Why wouldn't they ask that when they were the ones screaming that people were raped? Why wouldn't they? We're not talking about forensics anymore. We're talking about survivors of the kibbutz areas or of the festival who came to the hospital, and right that day, people were claiming rape. And you're telling me the hospital now didn't even offer that? We're not talking about forensics. We're not talking about military. We're talking about the hospital. None of this makes any sense. Either they weren't claiming they were raped or the hospitals were told not to. And you tell me what I'm missing here. That does not make sense. However, those tasked with collecting the bodies began reporting that many of the women were naked and bleeding from their genitals. Okay, so you see the point. There's a disconnect here. People that were going there weren't asked. The bodies that were sent weren't looked at. But suddenly the people that went and looked at the scene were the ones that came back with the well, you know what else happened at that same point? They looked at the scene and we were told they beheaded 40 babies. They looked at the scene. They told us they cut heads off with a shovel. They looked at the same thing. So I'm not saying this didn't happen. But what I'm saying is in the same context, we have people that are working on behalf of Israel who went there and then reported what they saw. Many of those have already been shown to be not true. So why wouldn't we at least consider this as one of those, especially with all the lacking evidence of everywhere else? On top of that, those who started collecting the bodies did not happen right away. That wasn't immediately. So my point is, we already know that IDF were killing their own people. And they knew this would in some way potentially put them in trouble. So I argue that it's not hard to understand that they would try to set the scene to make it look like this was Hamas did everything we claimed they did. How do you think a woman's pelvis got broken? It wasn't by rape. Mezingin, commander of the special unit of Zaka, that's the group. Zaka is a voluntary religious organization that collects the remains of the dead, whose group has basically become permanent in regard to this investigation, which I think it says later in the article. My point is, that's the guy we just heard from. Haaretz just called him a liar. He said in two different situations, one with Haaretz and one with publicly on a hearing or a press briefing in front of everybody, explicitly described, not by accident, a pregnant woman being cut open, kept alive, baby taken out, whole thing. So why would we take what they're saying else at face value? It says, quote, we collected 1,000 bodies in 10 days. See, that's my point. It wasn't immediate. From the festival site and kibbutz. No one saw more than us. It says, quote, it was clear they were trying to spread as much horror as they could, to kill, to burn. Yeah, well, so my point is you just came on the scene and saw what was left. You don't know who committed that crime. And that can't be disputed anymore since we know as a matter of fact that some of these killings were done by the IDF. It's certainly, maybe all of them. I don't know. But we know some for sure. It seemed their mission was to rape as many as possible. Well, that doesn't make much sense. Why would you take it to the level of rape as many as possible when we don't have individual examples at this point? Because I feel this is atrocity propaganda. Even if people were raped, the point is to make this about the worst, because as Sam Husseini keeps pointing out, they knew they were going to go on to do worse. That's how atrocity propaganda works, which Haaretz has just proven they were doing. And they point to this image. What do you think of that? Volunteers collected 1,000 bodies from the sites of the festival, and they show you this image, which is, you remember, the leftover after the cars that were fleeing were shot by the helicopters, by the IDF. Okay, well, so then explain to me how in the process of fleeing, they were raping people on the streets. This is, I think, provably lies, guys. That, again, doesn't mean that Hamas didn't rape anybody. But what I'm saying is it's very obvious, becoming even more so, that they're trying to manufacture something here. It says she describes scenes of unimaginable horror. Another person that we're being told saw this and relaying this through the IDF and through platforms that are clearly willing to toe lines. Quote, this is a huge building, but there were literally body bags filling every room and lining corridors, floor to ceiling, all oozing liquids. Okay. I just don't get the... Anyway, it's horrifying that people are being killed and this is happening. But when all we're doing is pointing at the aftermath, it does not, because the whole story is about who is responsible and what they did. When all you do is point that, that's like taking it a step further and saying, and the next day, those people were even worse. Like, what does that then matter to? The point is, it doesn't prove who actually did this, which is all this is really about. That what it really is about making this so disgusting and horrifying that you walk away going, man, who could ever believe things like, just like Piers Morgan did. My God, this is one of the most horrifying and appalling stories I've ever read. How anyone could possibly support Hamas after that. Well, not everybody supports Hamas, Piers, as you know, and you don't want to talk about. In fact, the vast majority of people arguably support the self-determination and anybody fighting for their freedom, not specifically actions carried out by the groups that Israel has been funding. My point is, he's talking about this same article. The article that doesn't actually prove anything, saying, my God, how can anybody read atrocity things like this and not blindly toe the line? It says, opening the body bags was scary as we didn't know what we would see. They're all young women. Now, this is at a place where they're only looking at women, apparently. Most in little clothing or shredded clothing and their bodies bloodied, particularly around their underwear. Yeah, and we don't know who committed that. Some women shot many times in the face as if to mutilate them. Their faces were in anguish, and often their fingers clenched as they died. And we saw women's pelvises were broken. That's the second time they've said that. Legs broken. There are women who had been shot in the crotch and the breast. They're trying, like, this adds to how it's just because they were that crazy and mutilating, which I have not seen this evidence. Really, to be honest, in some of these most extreme points, I've looked at the stuff they posted. There's some graphic images. But when we know, as a matter of fact, they've lied about the woman's stomach being cut open. We lied about the baby in the oven, lied about 40 beheaded babies, lied about children being killed, lied about people being beheaded while they were alive. Isn't it possible they lied about this too? There seems to be no doubt what happened to them. I guess. I mean, other than that, there's doubt everywhere. As more and more reports emerged, this person in charge, Elkayam Levy, was shocked at the lack of international reaction from people, groups like UN Women. On the 8th day, she gathered a group of international law and women's rights experts, including 160 law professors, and drafted letters to the UN agency sharing everything. Yeah, same stuff. Same inconclusive statements. The initial response, she says, was silence. It was absurd that it was so documented, yet accompanied by so much silence. You see the point? You can explicitly state that we don't have evidence that would hold up in a court of law. Then turn the story into, it's so proven and documented that I can't believe that they're not just blindly saying what we want them to. Doesn't that seem strange? There's no forensic evidence. All you're doing is saying secondhand reports. And then you're now turning it into, it's outrageous for people not to blindly believe what you're saying, and asking for evidence is an insult. It says, quote, they wanted to terrorize us for generations to come and instill in us an insecurity in the most basic way, and that's why they targeted women in this way. You might be forgiven for believing that was somebody speaking on behalf of the Palestinians. In fact, because I actually should have brought this up today, I didn't. Actually, hold on, I might have saved it. Hold on. Oh, no, the window closed when I refreshed. Too late. That's how that works. There was a post about a former IDF member speaking on the record and simply just saying that our job is to terrorize them, to make them insecure, to make them never know what's going to come next, so they never know, which is exactly what we're talking about. So as has become kind of a common point, When Zionists accuse, it's always an admission of guilt. That seems pretty obvious. With the women's stomach being cut open, that is something that was committed against Palestinians decades ago by Israelis. It's provable. You can look it up on Wikipedia. So the point is, when they say they wanted to terrorize us for generations to come, and we now see that many of the worst terrorizing things were made up, it's starting to become clear. IDF sources claim that Hamas fighters captured in Gaza have told them in interrogations that they were instructed to dirty the women. Well, yeah, it's the same thing we keep talking about. As Muhammad Shihada points out, Israel's own physicians for human rights explicitly rejected these interrogations, noting, "We have not relied on the accounts recorded in these videos due to severe concern that the interrogations included the use of torture." The link is right there. Though, obviously, I mean, that's why historically we don't take interrogations, especially those at parties that torture, like the U.S. government, like Israel's government, as we'll show you even more as we finish today, because we know that they can coerce people into doing what they want them to, as we'll make very clear in a second. As well, actually, I'll come back to that, I think. Yeah, it says they also show the Sunday Times photographs and footage not previously seen and too graphic to publish. I mean, this idea that we keep getting this idea that there's some worse things they haven't shown that would prove everything, I don't believe it. If you think by now that they wouldn't have shown you what they need you to see when they know they're failing in the information war, unless they're manufacturing that right now, which we've already caught them doing with fake AI images and so on. But it says most of the women are believed to have been killed or taken hostage. Right. So right there, you already know that means that there's no evidence, especially when they thought they were going to kill all the hostages. Well, then it's easy to claim things that we don't ever need to prove. There are reports some survivors, the festival survivors, have taken their own lives, while 18 are receiving treatment in mental institutions. Right. So all of the ones that actually survived, or a lot of them, who might be able to tell you what they want. Well, too bad everyone got killed. We can't list. But here are the ones that they did survive. And music festival massacre survivors have been involuntarily committed due to mental breakdowns. I guess that's what's happening. So they were kidnapped, and and your solution is to involuntarily commit them. How about we start wondering whether these people are simply people that have something else to say? It says, paradoxically, in a world where rape is being used as a weapon of war everywhere from Ethiopia to Ukraine, which of course they're still pointing at the allegation that Russia used that, even though it's been proven to be a lie, even by the person that said that in Ukraine, who then walked it back and said, I was just trying to motivate people to support Ukraine. Then it came back up again a week later. They used Viagra, just like they claimed in everywhere else. But they don't care because it's about just keeping the narratives going. This has been cited as one conflict where it did not happen. Now, why do you think that is? Because there's no evidence to back it up. Even the allegations they're saying, look, this person said this. Where are they? I'm not trying to be insensitive. What I'm saying is from an investigative journalist standpoint, that's because it did not seem to happen. Hamas denies that its fighters rape women, which of course they would say if they did, but it's one official has said, and this is the Washington Post that reported this, they consider any sexual relationship or activity outside of marriage to be completely haram, forbidden by Islam. Now, that's true. And I believe anybody that truly believes in Islam, that's the case. And I actually think that most people in this situation, even if they're brutal terrorists, do believe that. But I argue that a lot of these people aren't real, just like we talk about with any number of groups in ISIS, Al-Qaeda, Al-Nusra, Al-Haaretz, Al-Sham, that they've admitted that a lot of these people are simply assets. The leaders don't really believe the extremists. It's just sort of like the Zionist entity over Judaism. They don't really believe it. They're using it to manipulate the religion itself. So take that as you will. Palestinian women say they too have suffered sexual violence in Israeli jails, a claim denied by Israeli officials. Don't you love that? There's a whole article. You get one sentence. Even though there's decades of provable evidence coming from every United Nations, every international entity could possibly imagine saying, yeah, they rape people. Yeah, they torture them. And it's right to this day. One line. Women say it in Palestine too, but we don't believe them. Interesting how you believe women except Palestinians. Apparently, the International Criminal Court has announced it will investigate the October 7th attacks in the situation in Gaza, where about 1,500, far more than that now, have been killed in fighting. resumed on Friday. Kareem Khan, a chief prosecutor, can't talk right now, chief prosecutor for ICC, has spent the last 2 days in Israel meeting survivors and hostage families in Tel Aviv and the West Bank. Yeah, that's it. Great job. He will investigate crimes within our jurisdiction, deepening on the information we have and evidence potentially available. This is expected to include sexual violence. Well, seeing as how this guy is not going to Gaza and appears that he doesn't plan to, which I'll show you in a second, it kind of makes you wonder whether this is honest. Oh, you know what? I think I pulled that off, actually. I think I'll talk about it tomorrow. The point is, in general, people are pointing out that he's basically saying that that's not going to happen. And ultimately, every time this comes up, he is the one that seems to stall further action against Israel. So consider that. Finishes by saying, it's mind-blowing. We were there for our sisters, then terrible things happened across the ocean. When they took away abortion rights in the U.S., because that happened, didn't it? It's ridiculous. Nobody took away abortion rights. Like this narrative, it's because they're trying to manipulate people that don't know any better. Yeah, there were bills that were passed that changed the dynamic, but that's not removing your rights of abortion, or rather your ability to get an abortion. The point, though, it says the U.S. killing of women in Iran, or excuse me, the killing of women in Iran, some Freudian slip, right? The U.S. government killing them. The abduction of Yazidis, but with us, they look away. And I can't think of a reasonable answer. Is that what they're doing? They're looking away, or they're just waiting for evidence? It says, the former director of Israel's Authority for the Advancement of the Status of Women does have an answer. Israeli women have been betrayed, she said. What they are saying is, me too, except if you're a Jew. It's just the best they got at this point. Racism, anti-Semitism. You're a Nazi. You support terrorism. That's the only narrative. Everything you say, everything's been caught. Now let's talk about two examples that make that ridiculous. Just two. Two people that were primary to the Me Too movement that apparently they want you to believe is, well, Me Too, unless you're Jewish. Well, guess what? Gwyneth Paltrow. Her father was Jewish. Her father's Ashkenazi Jew, in fact. Family immigrated from Belarus to Poland. Here's another example. Lady Gaga. Two people that are they're two of the most prominent in, like, next to Rose McGowan and a couple of the other ones in the original Me Too movement. Well, guess what? She's Jewish. My point is how stupid it is that they can float these arguments. Like, isn't that insulting? Aren't you the one being racist when you say that? Me too, except if you're a Jew, except for those ones. Like, this is just desperately trying to make this about what you want it to be about. The point is that there's not enough evidence to make the allegation. And here's what we have now. This is from yesterday, right? So after this comes out, people are pointing it out. He goes, Israeli officials say Hamas doesn't want to release the remaining female hostages because it doesn't want them to speak publicly about what they endured on the 7th and their time in captivity. I mean, why would they think that would even ring for people? So despite everyone that's already come out and said that that's not what's happening, or interestingly enough, that that's what other people are saying, that you don't want your witnesses to come out because they might say, and you're actually taking action to stop them from speaking, telling them not to speak to the media, putting them in mental institutions. It's like they literally just can't accuse them of that which they are guilty. Now, that certainly could be true, but how are we going to believe that Israel's officials know what Hamas is thinking? It's like they don't even think before they release this stuff. And as Hala points out, Israel officials say equals trust me, bro. Now, Propaganda and Company points out in regard to this next article, this segment before we finish with the other side of the coin, essentially. The title says testimony after testimony on Hamas rape campaign. But the article literally says the commission has not taken testimony directly. I'll show you. That's how ridiculous this is. No victims, no rape kits, no semen, no physical evidence for rape, but the lies won't stop. Now, excuse me, I agree. The lies won't stop, even around this story. But at the same time, I still argue that doesn't mean it didn't happen. Until this all fleshes out, until we can speak to people that are still alive, they're still being held hostage and so on, we don't know. My point, though, is the fact that they're lying about the same situation really starts to make you think that this didn't happen. But We don't know. That's the fair way to put this. Now let's read this itself. See if, okay, we got it. Perfect. It says, what caused, and by the way, a lot of this is redundant because this is just simply November 30th, and it's the same as the Times article. But as the title reads, the scope of Hamas's campaign of rape against Israeli women is revealed, testimony after testimony. And where's that coming from? Well, the same guy, Elkalam Levy, right? So what happens now is they point to this article and that article as compounding evidence when really they're pointing at the same secondary, sometimes second, third-hand statements. So when they say testimony after testimony, what they're saying is this guy Levy told them that. Same point as the Times article. But it says what caused Kokov, this guy, Elkalam Levy, to break down this week was a brief phone conversation with Michael Herzog, or Michelle, the wife of Israel's president. The guy who's put forward some of the most laughably stupid lies that we can prove since this started. So just to start off on a good point, what started this was a call from the president. Now it says she thought Levy, that's who we're talking to, is a girl. Elkalam Levy is a girl. She thought this, quote, would be a task for 1 week, concrete and focused, to organize in a clear way all the information we would have about violence against women. Now, why would that be? She knew this was a mass casualty event. She knew this was a big event. She's there, right? So she gets tapped to do this job. And she thought it would be a task for a week. Now, why would she think that? Why wouldn't she think that what it's turned into? Because it doesn't take that long to break all this down. It's not a moving, fluid situation. It's static. It happened on the 7th, and that's it. Now, if people coming back from Gaza have allegations, that's to the story, but it's a different thing. They're talking about going through the evidence of what happened on the 7th, okay? So her point was, I thought it would be a week of investigation. But no, it turned into a nonstop, an ongoing, continual thing. What does that tell you, guys? Being objective and reading between the lines. That it's not just about combing through the evidence and reporting what's there. It's about something quite different. She goes, however, as the days went by, the magnitude of the task became clearer, and she realized that the ad hoc panel that she had set up would have to redefine itself as an organized body with a permanent presence in the field. Why would you need a permanent presence to investigate the event of one day? I just said it. I think it's very obvious. Now, all the people that are in this permanent going forward panel are all women and all volunteers. Now, I think my personal opinion is because women are much more affected by the allegation of rape. Just my opinion. But it says materials being gathered from a large number of sources. Quote, we are collecting materials from every sort. Same stuff, by the way. And it's not new information. It's from the 7th. Pictures, audio files, videos, testimonies, newspaper report. Okay, newspaper reports are meaningless because it's simply newspaper reports of the other things you've already reported. But you see how this works? The redundancies become the fleshing out of the story. And a new angle from a new writer becomes a new app. It's not new information. It's the same pictures, the same audio files, the same videos, and the same testimonies, maybe saved for the people we haven't heard from, if that's real, or people in Gaza. My point, though, is why is this a permanent, ongoing process? It's a propaganda effort, even if there were rapes. Now, it says sometimes, Levy says, the collection of the material has the characteristics of a detective operation. This gets very interesting. Quote, the other day, for example, she says, I was at the Knesset, at their Congress, their parliament, and during the hearing of the Committee on Women and Gender Equity on October 7th, a woman handed me a note with a very concrete information about one of the cases we're looking at. Quote, some of the pieces of information are also emerging from our dialogue with the media. Oh, wait, so no more on that? Okay. So you're in the middle of a hearing and somebody quietly hands you a piece of paper with concrete information. Does that sound like that makes sense? What could be on the written note that's concrete other than words that you can't confirm? This rape happened. Okay, rape happened. Concrete. I'm not trying to undermine. That seems interesting. So my point is, it's probably based on the person that handed it to her, and therefore they said it, therefore it's true. And More information emerging with our dialogue with the media. So the media that's reporting on what we're saying and our conversations with them have fleshed out our understanding. Okay. One of the journalists who called to ask about a specific incident succeeded in completing the picture for us with regard to the particular case. So there's no new evidence. You have all of the evidence. You're the ones investigating, and a journalist calls and asks you questions, and that somehow opens more information? Sure. Thus far, the commission has not taken testimony directly. Yeah, it says that. But will begin to soon. Testimony after testimony. You see the point? Whoever put them to this is writing this based on the allegation from people in power that that's what you're going to hear. That's not journalism. That's propaganda. If you have not taken testimonies yet, you can't claim that you know testimonies back up anything. But it says, quote, "We have waited for relevant witnesses to give official evidence to the police with the intention to then carry out in-depth interviews with them ourselves." Okay, well, if you have evidence that have been to the police, why is that not being reported to the world? Why is that being held back from international interviewers? And if it ends up coming out days, weeks later, a month later, why would that not be suspicious? Now, of course, same thing. Me too, unless you're a Jew. It's this kind of like a tag. Now, it says, when Levy was invited to speak on a panel organized by several different Jewish students at Harvard, she felt that the time was right to present some of the evidence to the world. Why would there be a time? Why would you withhold evidence for a month when people are accusing you of lying and you're acting like no one believes you, and you finally, well, today I'll do it. I'm just pointing out things that don't seem to ring true to me. Now it says, when her turn to speak came at Harvard, she delivered a detailed warning about the difficult things she was about to describe. Okay. Because it wasn't new evidence. It was you repeating what you already told people. That's what this is. She took a deep breath and began a horrifying survey. Now, maybe she believes all this. Maybe it's true. But are you following along that we have yet to see any provable evidence? Provable is my point. She recounted a long list of evidence, secondhand, third-hand, hearsay about acts of rape, including gang rape, disfigurement, and other acts of abuse. So many of the things we have proven didn't happen. She described a number of videos that Hamas distributed in which naked women are seen. Where are those videos? I mean, I don't want or enjoy to see these things. My point is that if this has been around and you've got some live video of this happening and you're literally screaming and nobody believes you, I find it really hard to believe that wouldn't have made the screening. To the journalists, you're told, are getting the real evidence. Now we've got 3 people on the record saying they didn't see any of that. But it says, with signs on them that leave little room for doubt. Hamas distributed in videos that Hamas distributed in which naked women are seen with signs on them. It's a weird way to say that. Does that mean signs within the video or signs hanging around their necks? In one case, the victim was taken to Gaza with no clothes on and unconscious, and displayed before a cheering crowd. Are they referring to Shani Luke, who did have clothes on? Who knows, right? Because we're just floating statements out with nothing to back it up. Unconscious, that makes sense. No clothes isn't true. She had clothes on and was exactly what she was wearing at the rave, by the way, and displayed before a cheering crowd. Pictures that had come into her hands showed other victims of sex crimes. She also read out several chilling descriptions of eyewitnesses of acts of rape. Okay, so literally a repetition of the same things we just went through. In addition to videos and pictures, Levy said she based her claims on testimony collected by the police, which we have yet to hear or see. I haven't heard any police talking about this. Forensic evidence gathered at the crime scenes, lies. There it is. Information given by paramedics and Zaka volunteers who just told us they saw women being cut open with their babies taken out, and that's been proven to be a lie. By your platform, by the way, by Haaretz. Reports from volunteers at the Forensic Medical Institute and testimonies from Hamas terrorists captured by Israel and interrogated, which even Israel, their human rights team didn't take at face value because they were tortured. Okay. We know they did not get any forensic information. Then we know the week passed. That's the important part. Now, after a month of the massacre, the window for collecting the rape it has closed. They had about a week. It's over. So now we can, on the record, we can show them claiming that they have forensic evidence gathered at the crime scenes. Now, of course, they could mean something they picked up off the ground. But again, they're telling us they did not take any forensic evidence. But let's just say for sake of conversation, it was just specifically not rape kits. Not the same thing. What forensic evidence on the ground would prove rape? Let's just even say there was something that would prove rape. Are we to pretend that they took forensic evidence of surrounding things and chose not to do the thing that would prove it? I mean, that's challenged by the very claim that they said they didn't do any forensic because they were focused on other things. Only on identification, and that's it. Okay, so it's very obvious. Levy is lying. There is no forensic evidence in regard to the crime scenes for rape, period. That's reported by Times of Israel, is reported by their own forensic team. So, I mean, I'm not, again, make this clear. Even though we can prove he's lying, that still doesn't mean we know for sure rape didn't happen. That's just being objective. But we know for sure they're lying about the evidence around the rape. Information given by paramedics and Zaka volunteers were lies. It says, we are assuming that many more cases will surface in the future. That's a very strange thing to say. Why would you assume that? And when they come up later down the line, why would we believe that? Doesn't mean we should ignore it. My point, though, is that at this point, with how many people we can prove have been put to lying by somebody, why would they? So a month from now, and lady comes up with a horrific story that lines up exactly with what they want you to think is happening, we should question that, while considering that she may be telling the truth and just had a hard time coming forward. But just don't miss this point. He lied. She lied about anything forensically proving this. Now it says, according to the information you have in hand, were sex crimes committed throughout the entire region under attack? She says yes. The torture of women was weaponized in the destruction of communities, in sowing general horror, and in breaking the spirit of the Israelis, she continues. Same point we heard before. She reached this conclusion in part. So again, that seems to sound like people are coordinating the responses. She reached this conclusion in part from what has been said by the terrorists who were arrested by Israel. Okay, so the interrogations, which the human rights team group at Israel, they didn't say it exactly. Hold on. The physicians for human rights have rejected them because they tortured them to get that response. So that's right there, something that seems to cast doubt. And who have testified to their interrogations that the mission assigned them, including rape. So this is the point about them claiming that they were instructed to do this. It says, and indeed, the Shin Bet Security Service has released recordings of at least 2 investigations where they were asked whether they had been given specific orders to abuse women. So they torture them until they respond. That's at least possible. So that's why the physicians for human rights said, well, we can't take that at face value. So neither should you if their own team isn't doing that. But they're saying, yes, we were told to soil them and rape them. After you see them with beaten up and scratches that they're shaking and then reporting this to their cameras. It says a second terrorist related that the commander said, you have to step on their heads, cut off their heads, which now know didn't happen. Per their own information. Per Haaretz proving they lied. So there you go. You can't lie about everything without challenging previous lies. A military source cited by the Daily Yidoth noted that the terrorists related to the aim of cutting off heads and rape was to sow fear and alarm in the Israeli public. Sounds like a tactic of the Zionists. Moreover, in an interview with CNN, President Isaac Herzog revealed a pamphlet. Another pamphlet that was found in the body of a terrorist. No, wouldn't you think that if they found all this, that would be presented at one time? But it's weird how day by day they trickle out. Oh, we found another pamphlet that perfectly aligns with what we want you to think today. Oh, look at that. We found a chemical weapons alligator. Oh, look, they found Mein Kampf on the day we want you to call them Nazis. This is just some of the most embarrassing efforts I've ever seen. So if Herzog is saying that, we should probably ask whether he's lying. Including a detailed checklist for the kidnapping of hostages. This is what he says. This booklet, a little booklet, is the set of instructions on how to get into people's yards, into kibbutz, a city, how to break in. Right. So they need a booklet on the 1, 2, 3 on how to go into their yard and break in. What are they picking locks? This is really stupid. And the first thing, what do you do when you find the citizens? X, Y, O. Number 1, open the booklet. Number 1, torture them. Number 2, rape them. Got it. That's what he's arguing. How to abduct and kidnap them. Step 1, 2, and 3. I mean, this is how stupid they think Western audiences are. Be insulted by that. So he's the one making these allegations. In Levy's view, this is a replication of those same denial mechanisms often applied concerning individual cases of rape. All right, so they're arguing that we're just denying everybody's claims. Well, no, that's per individual discussions or even group and people's perception of it. From an investigator standpoint, which is what they really are talking about because they're calling for action, you don't deny or accept, you ask for evidence, which they do not have. But it says, quote, when a woman is raped, the discourse immediately revolves around evidentiary questions. Yes, it does. Is there or is there not evidence of rape? Then it goes on to say, after that very basic and we all should agree with statement, doubt is cast on the women. Her reliability is questioned, and a question mark is posed as to whether it happened or not. Well, no, that's your very weird segue into something that might happen. The point is, yes, the first statement is, do we have evidence? Because blindly accepting someone's claim is dumb, no matter where you are or what you're talking about. But doubt would be cast on somebody if people feel they have doubt. And sometimes, yes, that's done unjustly. But to claim that's like the process in the West is pretty dumb, especially since we just went through a movement that was like blindly believing these claims and we still haven't really that's still tapering down at this moment. So they're just desperately trying to revitalize that for their own benefit is what's happening. This casting of doubt is now directed against us at the collective level. No, it's not. We're just wanting you to prove your claims. She goes on to say, questions are asked like, is there or is there not semen? Well, that seems pretty relevant. Was there or wasn't there a rape kit? Well, yeah, that's exactly. That's what we should be asking. She goes on to say, those same female jurists with international reputations who are conducting this discussion apparently do not have the basic understanding of international law. Does that make sense to anybody? So asking for evidence shows a lack of understanding of the law? I mean, that's the claim. Do I even need to make a statement about that? She goes on to say, international law does not talk the language of the individual case. Huh? My call to them is to look beyond those denial mechanisms. So now this is my point. One of the central points of today. Denial mechanism is now asking for evidence. You see? So asking for them to literally provide evidence for their claims is you denying things. Think of it like the Holocaust discussion. It's the same kind of dynamic. And there's plenty of Jews that are going to argue that has been used to undermine other topics. The point is, obviously things happened. Obviously it's a horrible thing in history. But the fact that we're not allowed to go, well, what I wonder whether, racist. Plenty of people point that out. But most people scurry away from it because they're afraid to get called racist. It's only even insulting if you suggest that it didn't happen or that ultimately that people weren't hurt. To argue that the numbers might have been manipulated, why would that even be so contentious? The point here, and honestly, I don't think that. I'm just simply pointing out that people out there that are saying that might be, it's because it seems there's a agenda around it. And here, if you're now literally using the same dynamic to say that asking for evidence is denial, well, you're making our point for us. And this is a Zionist game that's been going on from the beginning. It says, you are facing a bunch of respected women and telling them that shocking crimes were committed here. Wait, you are facing a bunch of respected women and telling them that shocking crimes, seems like she's talking about the other person. Why would she say you and speaking about herself? Anyway, it says, I am the one who needs to provide the evidence. Am I the one who needs? Yes, I think she just mistyped that. I guess this is her right here. facing a bunch of respected women and telling them shocking crimes were committed here. Am I the one who needs to provide the evidence for the terrorist deeds? Yeah. I mean, the fact that you're asking that is shocking to me. So the person conducting the investigation is shocked that they need to provide evidence to back up the claims that it was done to them by, I mean, I don't know. I don't even know how to make that. That is just unbelievable. But it says, what kind of travesty is it that they are imposing the burden of proof on me? So who exactly is the burden of proof on? The person that was killed? The Hamas member? It's the person that is making the allegation. You are the group that is saying this happened. When we go, well, please show me evidence so I can report it, and you call us racist, and you ask, you're outraged. How dare you ask for evidence? I mean, come on. It says, in the case of October 7, we will never know the extent of the damage, she continues. Interesting. We know that the vast majority of those who were harmed were also murdered. Well, that's exactly. If there are survivors among those who were harmed, decades could go by before they gather the courage to talk about it. That's certainly possible. And the only statement there would be, if they do not come forward, then we can't definitively claim it happened. That's not to say that they don't have evidence. I respect their privacy. But from an investigatory standpoint, you can't then be outraged that we don't dare to believe that you're pointing at them and you tell us what they think and say. That's not enough. In the few cases in which someone else witnessed their suffering, she says, I assume that then two questions will arise as to exactly what he saw and whether it is a reliable witness. Yeah, I don't intend to participate in that game. Okay, so you're already claiming that it's insulting to ask to verify things. That's what this is. Nevertheless, your group is collecting evidence. Right, so why would you collect any evidence if your point is we already have enough and asking for it is insulting? See that inconsistency? Cross-referencing details. She says, true, but not because we're looking at an individual instance and considering whether or not it confirms to the minimal criminal threshold. So she's admitting on the record, we're not even trying to prove this. And to her point before about international law, are you really trying to argue that if one person gets raped by somebody in a wartime situation, that there's no standing law legally by international law for one case of rape? That's just flat out wrong. But let me read it again. She says, yes, we're collecting evidence, but not looking at the individual instance and considering whether or not it confirms to the minimal criminal threshold, otherwise stated as evidence that needs to prove this in a court of law. The very fact, she says, that this discussion is taking place drives me crazy. I imagine it would when you don't have enough evidence to prove your claim. The question we want to deal with is not whether something happened, but rather what type of crimes were committed. Yeah, you know why? Because it seems very clear that there was mutilated bodies. My question is, who did that? You don't want us asking that question, which seems in and of itself very suspicious. The systematic way they were committed and the orders to commit them. So we're supposed to rely on some secondhand piece of paper that Herzog says he found that he claims was their report to. Anybody could have wrote that, if it's even real. He showed us a cover for a CD and claimed it was a claim of chemical weapons instructions. This is trying to claim that the superficial parts are more important than the actual evidence. The question of evidence, she continues, that has been collected by police or not is completely secondary. So I think the game is trying to play that people are denying that anything happened and then being outraged that asking for evidence implies that nothing happened. That's not what's happening. We're asking for evidence of whether or not specific claims within the larger massacre happened, because that matters. Ultimately, you keep claiming there are atrocities that keep getting shown and proven to be false. Not this person in particular, but the larger agenda. So it seems very interestingly, it's very telling that we're at a point now where it becomes we are acting like evidence in and of itself is insulting, so move forward. We aren't at all in a discussion of whether there were horrors here. See my point? Nobody seems to be, but you. We're talking about who committed them, right? Or if we're ultimately talking about the specific atrocities, right? We know people were mutilated. We know people were hurt. We know that there are broken pelvises per their reports and whatever else we're being told. I mean, you could question that ultimately because it came from the IDF. But ultimately, the point is, you can't keep telling us Hamas did all this with no evidence to back it up. Especially when you can prove, this is the dynamic, because that statement alone might shock somebody because it would imply that we're jumping to the conclusion that somebody else did it when there's evidence to suggest they were there. But remember, the IDF shot their own people. They tried to cover up what happened, and every single person that's come back has told you something different. Now it says, it is clear that any intentional international body that will investigate them will get heaps of material that support this. That's not, you just told us there's no forensic evidence, that you don't even think it's a fair conversation, but apparently if some international body reaches out, you'll dump it all on them. That heaps of material are just the same redundant stories, articles, audio, which, by the way, the audios have been broken down and been shown to be lies of many times that Israel puts up the statements between Hamas. The first one they put out was proven to be a lie by even the BBC. It says the aim is to reveal to humanity the depth of the suffering. The critical mass is the heart of the matter and not this or that cross-sectional of an individual case. All right, so stop focusing on the fact that you can't prove these cases and start listening to our atrocity narrative. But in the meantime, when the other side takes a specific extreme case and manages to refute it, it serves the side to undermine the overall narrative and causes crack in the big picture. Or you could read that as, when somebody really investigates the individual case and points out there's not enough evidence to make the claim, doesn't that then make people question it? Yes, it does. Rightly so. Perhaps the very fact of engaging with a single case is falling into a trap. Except she just told you she's not doing that. Clearly, you guys talked this out before the supposed interview, but it says the danger always exists. Therefore, for example, we do not publish an email address out of concern that hostile elements will try to plant false information. Right. That will undermine our credibility. So you're telling us you don't put out a email address that only you have access to because you're worried somebody might send things that aren't true that will undermine your credibility? Or, I mean, you could go so many directions with that. To not put out an address for somebody like that who might be able to secretly send you something like, I had this happen to me, which is exactly what you're telling us is happening, that they're afraid to come forward. It seems like an effort to make sure you don't get that, or to be able to act like you weren't able to because of this. It says, I'll tell you more than that. Just the other day, someone claimed that a certain detail that she specifically passed along was mistaken. I already pointed out two that they're lying about. She says, when I present what I know, I present the most reliable information. Yeah, the most reliable doesn't mean true. Most reliable to her is whatever President Herzog said, or whatever they're getting from their friends, from the first responders. But it says, I have that point in time. Possibly over some time, of the things we thought we had found, we will turn. See right there. Possibly over time, some of the things we thought we had found will turn out to have been incorrect. Too late. So think about this. To state on the record that some of the things that you're stating as aggressive fact and shouting people down for disregarding might turn out to be incorrect is exactly our point. Is it not? That's why it's irresponsible to not demand evidence. Because you're literally going, well, we don't even know. It could be wrong tomorrow. Yeah, exactly. And I would posit that most of them, if not some of them, or rather some of them, if not most of them, are lying about it. It says, to the same extent, I am convinced that the opposite will also happen. A shard of evidence we hadn't known about will develop into dimensions we can't imagine. See my point? What exactly is going to change tomorrow, next month? It happened on the 7th. And that's all we're talking about. They've had a month to comb through this information. What exact shard of evidence? I mean, that's certainly possible, I guess. But the idea is that they're telling you this is done, and that other than identifying bodies, reality is what we're telling you. So I think this is about keeping this an ongoing thing. That's why they made this Zaka thing a permanent installation. Even though we've already proven that they lied, one of the most egregious lies that we can prove didn't happen. So they know they lied about that. So we shouldn't trust any of this. It says, therefore, we see importance in documenting these small fragments of information. We are not an investigation or prosecutorial body. Our task is historical, or more specifically, setting the narrative. They even go on to say, what about Hasbara? Exactly. Have you found yourself becoming a relay station for the horror stories? She says, no, I do not allow myself to go there. Even with requests for numbers, I don't cooperate. They ask me, how many? How many were raped? How many died? She says, there was one journalist here, a woman from Foreign News Network, who drove me crazy. She says, are we talking about tens, hundreds, thousands? She said, I'm sorry. No, it would be irresponsible for me to cite a number. Or, I mean, come on. So you guys are claiming that this happened, and you have journalists who are simply doing their jobs, the rare occurrence, trying to get how many were raped. What happened? At least give us an estimate of what you think happened. That's not going to happen. Irresponsible. No, it's irresponsible to pretend that you can claim something without ever showing people the information. And the fact that you act like it's insulting to give the basic number and information makes me think it didn't happen. It says, why is a numerical estimation irresponsible? Even Haaretz asked that. She says, first of all, because there are cases that we will never know about. So you're saying that because we will never know about people that might have happened to, we'll never give a number? You see, because that doesn't have an endpoint. If there are cases we'll never know about, your argument is we should never cite a number. This stuff doesn't add up with the basic functioning of any process anywhere else in the world. This is crazy. She says, considering that most victims were murdered. Well, yeah, that's the point. That they're just asking for a unemotional breakdown of what we think happened. She says, secondly, I am not willing to make the distinction between torture, gang rape, and a sex crime. They're not asking for that. A woman who was executed, women and girls who were targeted for being girls, so we're told. Each story is a world of its own and an unimaginable tragedy. As she kind of waxes into some other area without gender violence, she goes on, as a much broader term than sexual violence. See, we just went into another conversation. It means tearing a baby away from its mother. What does that have to do with the journalist saying how many people were raped? The demand for numbers goes against everything I stand for. As a body tasked with investigating what happened, then you're not in the right position, unless the job is to cover this up. Dr. Sari Arani, who leads the documentation team at the Civil Commission, also believes that any discussion of numbers is sick. Says, we're trying to find out the truth, to bear witness, is what they keep saying. That Owen Jones points that out as well. From my familiarity with the materials, I can tell you that many things happened. Many, many different things. So how dare you ask for information? Trust me, many, many things happened. And we're supposed to be okay with that? Guys, I mean, this just devolves further and further into a ridiculous way. And, it's there's 1,000 reasons why we should realize that these people are clearly lying, even if rape did happen. It says the guidelines for bodies focused on identification, protection of the dignity of the bodies, and immediate burial. And not on collecting evidence. The goal was to evacuate, not investigate. Yeah, we know that already. This is the point, is that they ultimately made a choice. And that's right in the beginning. Excuse me. So a week goes by. 5 days go by. That's a long time. These bodies are sitting in the morgue. There's forensic people there. Nothing's being done. That is not justifiable. According to the report in the Daily, and especially as they were claiming rape on day one. According to the report in the Daily Israel Hayom, based on Zaka volunteers' testimonies, which we've already shown that were the main one was a lie. Some of the male victims' bodies also showed signs of sexual torture. Oh, okay. So now we've got claims of males being raped or sexually abused. Where is that in anything? I have not seen a single claim of that. I have not, outside of this report right here, I haven't seen any testimony, video, evidence of any kind. That neither of necrophilia, but you see, just keep adding different elements without verification. Israeli diplomat Sarah Weiss-Mundi, who has served as the vice chair of the UN Legal Committee, has also said Israel has submitted to the UN unequivocal evidence of rape incidents, including gang rape and traces of semen found in the bodies of young women. Did you catch it? How so? Look at that, guys. Israeli diplomat lies and says that they found semen in one of the women that no, they didn't, guys. No, they did not. Physical evidence for rape could be collected in decent manner. It says for a month. I would say now for a month after The evidence it says the window for collecting physical evidence of rape that can stand up in court is closed. Under good conditions, authorities would have about a week to collect from the bodies if they were promptly handled. They did not do that. It's repeatedly stated in this and everything else. And yet they're just lying about it. Now they found forensic evidence a month later. How exactly is that possible? I understand. It says in a murdered body. So that means on October 7th, somebody was killed, and they're somehow claiming against the actual statements of the Forensic Institute that they got forensic evidence, despite them claiming that they did not do that because they were told not to. Case closed. I mean, look, I'm not saying rape didn't happen, only because it's certainly possible based on the unknowns of the search situation. But case closed in the sense that they are provably lying. Why would they need to do that? It says we were wasting trying to convince them just to listen to us, just to believe us. Right. So all we want is just believe what we're saying. In addition to ripping the mask off women's organizations associated with the UN, the commission has also taken a personal approach toward activists and international figures whose reaction to the 7th was outrageous. All right, so you're not allowed to have your own opinion about what happened. If you think other than what the Israel government says you're supposed to think, they're going to attack you. Samantha Person, the head of the University of Alberta Sexual Assault Center, somebody who knows about these things, who claimed there was no proof that Hamas terrorists raped women during the terror attack. And what they do? They went after her. They got her removed from her job. See, anybody who's like, well, yeah, I don't see any proof, because there's not. We just proved that. They stood up quick and said, get out, fire them, pressured somebody at their position to make them removed from the job. The next target, they're telling you right now, the next target, Reem Asalim, a special rapporteur on UN of Human Rights Council. Right, so somebody who knows what they're talking about, whose role is to monitor whether member states meet international standards for protecting women. It says, I received an email in which she demanded to see proof for her accusation. How dare she? How insulting that she wants to see evidence of the crime. She is a rapporteur. Where's the main point? Oh, but the main point says who recently released a statement describing October 7th as the day Israel launched a genocide. They did. But the point is, that doesn't mean that they're ignoring what happened on the 7th. They're simply saying that on that same day, Israel then went on to initiate their genocide. They said as much. But you see, the facts aren't part of this conversation. It says it's a totally insane move in my view. I don't love the word campaign, but our intention is to expose the world to a figure who is just abusing, I have no other word for it, global public funds. Right, so because she asked for evidence and because she acknowledged genocide, now you have to get her removed. So that's your campaign to attack this person. This is what's happening. Now, since we went way longer, I want to just end with try to rapidly go through this to finish. Just some of the other examples of what happens to Palestinians. Here's 2017. Rabbi who urged Gaza genocide excused rape by soldiers. And in case you think it doesn't matter, only in certain, here's Reuters. Israeli military chief rabbi designate under fire over remarks on rape. This has made the rounds. He very much said this, that it's okay to rape the Palestinian women. Mondawais, how colonizers weaponize rape, reflections from the Palestinian case. If those aren't good enough for you, here's Amnesty International, which might load. There we go. Rape and sexual abuse, torture and ill treatment of women in detention. These are nonstop. And that was the point that I'm rushing through. Israel is right here. Dozens of Palestinian women and children detained in occupied territories have reportedly been sexually abused or threatened in sexually explicit language during interrogations. It goes on a list of some explicitly disgusting things. Here from B'Tselem, 2014, abuse and torture and interrogations of dozens of Palestinian minors in the Israeli police, specifically the Etzion facility. The I forget what it stands for again. The Car Institute, the Car... in interest of time, I'm going to go past it, but we've talked about this institute before. Israeli guards rape Palestinian women, right? These are 15 Palestinian women who were raped by Israeli interrogators to force them to confess to charges they did not commit. Quote, Israeli investigators and intelligence officers keep videotapes of the raping women to blackmail the female detainees, knowing that if it were released, that it would ruin their reputation. Right? This is used against them. This is from the Jerusalem Fund for Education and Community Development. Sexual harassment and violence against Palestinian women in Israeli prisons, a regular occurrence. Read it for yourself. This one coming from the Defense for Children Palestine International. Israeli interrogator sexually assaults Palestinian child detainee. This is a main report from the International Middle East Media Center. It's reporting that at least 600, this 2014, 600 Palestinian children were arrested in Jerusalem since last June. Of these children, nearly 40% were reportedly exposed to sexual abuse during arrest or investigation of the Israeli authorities, according to a report specifically for the Palestinian Prisoner Society. Here's Human Rights Watch from 2015. Security forces abuse Palestinian children, and that's both sexually and physically. Here from The Guardian, a hidden universe of suffering, the Palestinian children sent to jail. Same conversation from 2023. From September. Just before this. It's amazing we can't remember that when it happened this year in September. The torture and rape and punishment of the children in prison, but I guess we don't care about that. Here's one from the Telegraph. Israel furious at the United Nations after they reported detailing torture of Palestinian children. 2013. I was going to read through most of these, but I'm going to just go quickly here. From the Jerusalem Post. Israel tortures detained Palestinian children. Here's a report directly from the United States Department, U.S. State Department. And I lost this, but luckily I saved these. Israeli civilians committed violent acts against Palestinian civilians and their property with reportedly little or no intervention and no subsequent investigation by Israeli officials. Some settlers reportedly used violence against Palestinians to keep them away from settlements and land that they sought to take. So their land. Between 2009 and mid-year, settlers committed approximately 1,000 acts of violence against Palestinians and their property. 38 cases, this is from the U.S. government, by the way, 38 cases of children attacked, injured by settlers between 2008 and 2010, near settlements in the vicinity of these multiple areas. 3 of these incidents, children were killed. A November 2009 UN report cited settler violence as a key factor undermining the physical security and livelihoods of Palestinians in many areas of the West Bank. You know, what they always claim they're trying to do in reverse. July 26th, settlers conducted a series of attacks for more than 12 hours on Palestinian villages, assaulting Palestinians, looting vehicles, burning nearby fields. According to multiple NGOs or media reports, IDF largely observed the attacks and took no action. This is not new. This has been going on for 75 years. September 1st, following a Hamas-related shooting that killed 4 Israeli settlers, approximately 50 settlers from this area near Hebron threw rocks at the nearby home of a Palestinian family. Settlers knocked over outside fixtures and set fire to the grass. So by the same logic, shouldn't they be able to shoot them because they're throwing rocks? Isn't that what the Israeli government says? They shoot children for throwing rocks. On the same day, another settler attack arbitrarily targeted Palestinian vehicles by breaking windows near the jet junction between Nablus. Now, I just wanted to include that because settlers are doing this on a regular basis, but here's the important parts about rape. Israeli law, high court rulings, and an IDF order prohibit Israeli forces from using human shields, but the prohibition was reportedly not always observed. You know that. We've talked about this at length. They use human shields. It's an open secret. I've got that. There we go. Include that for you. The main show. There's one of them right there as they're fighting people. Open secret of human shields used in Israel. Goes on to say Israel soldiers use civilians, including 3 children, according to the DCI Palestine, as human shields, endangering their lives by forcing them to remain in or near houses being used as military positions or carrying out dangerous tasks like inspecting properties. On February 18th, during a raid on a house in Nablus, Israeli soldiers reportedly forced a 16-year-old child to search her home for potential booby traps. The soldiers ordered her to open closets and lift mattresses in the house, according to the group. There was no investigation or update for the year's end. On April 16th, 2 IDF soldiers detained a 14-year-old in front of a school, forced him to walk in front of them while they dealt with Palestinians. That's the point. That's human shield. That's the neighbor procedure. Urged by the IDF personnel, they threw stones, That's all. They basically, that's all they're being charged with. The incident was photographed and published widely in Palestinian media. October 19th, Israeli military prosecutor for operational matters indicted that military police, indicated that they had opened an investigation, but there was no end. That's what they always do. If they need to open it, they never actually follow through. Rarely. August 19th, IDF soldiers near Nablus beat a 13-year-old boy known as Nazal during a raid and forced him to guide them through an inspection of his uncle's house. There was no investigation opened. In the first conviction of Israel's courts in a human shield case on October 3rd, Israeli military court convinced 2 unidentified Israeli soldiers to search bags believed to contain explosives. Authorities sentenced the soldiers to 3 months suspended time, but both were demoted. So they got no time, and I'm willing to bet you they probably even got promoted after the fact. Now, here it is. The NGO Defense for Children claimed Israeli security authorities often tortured and abused minors in custody to coerce confessions during interrogation, employing tactics such as beatings, long-term handcuffing, threats, rape, and solitary confinement. The 40 affidavits collected in the last 6 months of the year, 28 children arrested and detained by the IDF claimed they were beaten, kicked, 24 experienced some form of position abuse, 7 were stripped naked, and there were 3 subjected to electric shocks. Children. Israeli soldiers arrested a 16-year-old known as Basil from the West Bank. Soldiers blindfolded, bound, and beat him, transferred him to local settlers, who then also beat him. He claimed he was pressured into confessing to throwing stones and that they threatened to imprison him with electric shocks. The IDF later left him barefoot on the side of the road at 1 a.m. in the morning, 10 miles from his house. That's per the U.S. and these NGOs. In 2008, according to the NGO Public Committee Against Torture in Israel, the Israeli security agency, Shin Bet, arrested this person, interrogating him and his parents. The interrogator allegedly threatened to demolish the family home if they did not convince the person to confess to rigging a car bomb. Sounds like what our police do. And in August, former Israeli soldier posted online photographs of herself posing with blindfolded, handcuffed Palestinians. I wonder where they got that from Abu Ghraib, huh? Now, I lost most of what I had here. On December 30th, Tel Aviv District Court convicted a former president of rape and obstruction of justice, as well as the sexual assault and sexual harassment of 3 government employees, which is another part we're going to get into, including spousal rape. Let's see, there was a part with, you can look at the rest for yourself. Here's the point that I was going to really get into to finish. Oh, as there was a part in there about the renovations of the jails and how horrible it was. I just want to point out that Ben-Gvir made a point to go through to make sure it didn't change, even though the United Nations and international groups were demanding that they made it applicable to international law. He showed up to make sure it didn't happen. Now here is an example of a child being beaten. It still happens. So what it says, the kid has a cast on, and basically they try to arrest this soldier in front of his family, this child. Rania points out basic information on detention campaigns carried out in the West Bank after October 7th. So just after October 7th until today, until November 3rd. 3,000, realize the month after this too. 3,480 arrest cases have been recorded. 147 women, including those who were arrested from the occupied lands in Gaza women. 245 children have been arrested. 41 journalists. I mean, guys, this is all in West Bank. It's just so egregiously obvious, everything that's happening. And as DD Geopolitics points out, As is typical for the Zionist entity, every accusation they make is actually a confession. A closer examination of the situation shows that the entity is about as far from a feminist state as possible. The reality is the so-called state of Israel is not only a haven for sex offenders from all around the world, but they also intimately involved in one of the most serious international sex trafficking scandals the modern era has ever seen. Let's not forget, Ehud Barak was had been at the Epstein Island and was friends with Epstein. And then to finish was that point that this goes beyond what's being done to the Palestinians. Apparently, this is a open secret in regard to Israeli hierarchy society. And that's why the point about the former president being arrested. 17 Israeli soldiers investigated in rape cases. And there's so much we can go into in this regard. But 40 cases of rape reported in the IDF, signifying a rise in complaints. Senior IDF officer says there's no increase in cases. They're just reporting it more. Well, this one says, gang rapes in Israel, a spike in cases, or business as usual. Here's the Times of Israel reporting 9 out of 10 rape cases in Israel closed without charges. That's from 2019. So clearly there's been a problem and they're not addressing it, as the Daily Beast points out, opening up about sexual assault in Israel. It says 1 of every 3 Israeli women is a survivor of sexual assault. And we're talking about by Israeli men. But for a long time, it was almost never talked about. Well, it seems there's a bigger problem than we realize. So I think bringing this back to the main point, this is just to show you some context. I think it's quite obvious that where we're at in this conversation, there's not enough evidence to back up the larger points that are being made. Now, if that bothers people that we're trying to get to the truth with provable information, maybe you should reflect on that. There is no allegation that is too serious or too sensitive for you to ask for evidence. That's the weird thing about this. There's been so many jarring situations in this whole thing where they're directly stating things that are actually serving to wake people up because they're just so jarring and so obvious. But in a way, it's a good thing that we can actually see through the lies, but it doesn't mean we should ignore things. You know, what crimes were committed on October 7th. Hamas did very clearly commit war crimes. We just have to be honest about what we're seeing and be objective. And civilians matter, whether they're Israeli, whether they're Palestinian, whether they're anywhere. And that's the key thing that people, that's what's been exposing people from the beginning of this. The people that we keep pointing out that redirect outrage in only one direction and act like you're the racist. The average person was shaken free from that. So we need to continue to demand evidence. We need to continue to prove what we're discussing and be objective in a nonpartisan way. I see a growing movement of this, and I think we need to continue to push it, guys, because that is what they're most afraid of. Nonpartisan, objective conversation. So help me fight for that. Thank you for being here today. Thank you for continuing to support our platform. Underneath the links in every video, there's a lot of ways you can support this platform. The best way, I think, is just to go to our platform, our donation portal on the website itself. Sign up for $1 a month on a recurring donation. Never think about it again. And you are part of this platform. You are the last American Vagabond, so we can keep this moving forward. We have our Autonomy program and Autonomy in general, which you can support, which will help this platform, our Substack, and a lot of different things. But as always, the most important thing, share the work. Get the link out there, break this down, make clips. Just take the source material and show people what you think is important. Get the information out there. That's what we need to do. There's a reason that platforms like ours, and it's not just TLAV, and maybe you think I'm wrong on this, but go look at our track record, that we can be damn near consistently right and ahead of most every big story for a really long time and still be regarded as some kind of fringe conspiracy side thing. Tells you something. And all the ones out there and the ones that I don't believe are truly honest or only care about things that aren't the truth, rise and rise and rise and rise as they continue to lie. There's a reason for that. But we're going to buck the system. We are going to change the game. Help us do that. I love you all. As always, question everything. Come to your own conclusions. Stay vigilant.